Chapter 92. The genealogy is here. Don't mess around. Nan Gongming said with a trembling voice. He passed a book to Yi Xian and pulled the child back. Yi Xian flipped open the genealogy and compared the names and photos on it. He scanned through the members of the Nan Gong family and a strange bloody light flickered in his eyes. Not bad, everything is here. You've done well and I'm very satisfied. Yi Xian closed the genealogy and smiled creepily. He said in a cold voice, all of you, kneel down now and video call Nan Gong Tian. Don't tell me that you can't contact him. Otherwise, I don't know what I'll do. In your dreams. All of a sudden, a girl's voice was heard from the crowd. A young lady walked out quickly and pointed at Yi Xian. She scolded angrily, you demon, even if the entire Nan Gong family dies here, we won't give in to you. Yi Xian smiled brightly when he saw the young lady. He said, Nan Gong Ling, the fourth miss of the Nan Gong family. It's a pity that you're going to turn into a corpse at such a young age. It's indeed a spoilsport. Whoosh! A wisp of blood light tore through the night sky. Yi Xian's smile didn't change. Under the dumbfounded gazes of everyone, a bloody scar appeared on the woman's throat. Fresh blood spurted out, and her eyes widened as she slowly fell to the ground. Is there anyone else who wants to object to my suggestion? Yi Xian looked at the members of the Nan Gong family as if he had just done something casual. Auntie. Sister. My daughter. All sorts of cries rang out, causing the entire Nan Gong family to fall into grief. The way they looked at Yi Xian was filled with hatred that even the 3 rivers and 4 seas couldn't wash away. Do you hate? Are you angry? Are you resentful? Yi Xian shook his head slowly and said eerily, it's a pity that you don't have the ability to take revenge. Follow my instructions and contact Nan Gong Tian now. Otherwise, the child will be the next to die. Yi Xian's sword-like fingers flickered with blood-red light, as if she was going to kill the child in the next moment. No, no. I promise you. Nan Gongming's body trembled as he held the child tightly in his arms. However, at this moment, he was on the verge of breaking down. Nan Gongming took out his phone and hesitated. However, when he saw the terrified face of the child behind him, he decided to video call Nan Gong Tian. A helicopter was rumbling loudly on the rooftop of a skyscraper. Nan Gong Tian was sitting in it, but his face was still pale. Ring ring ring. A melodious ringtone was heard. Nan Gong Tian was elated when he saw the name displayed on the phone. He quickly picked up the video call. Hey, Ming, have you guys left Xia country? Nan Gong Tian asked anxiously before he could see the video clearly. Dad. On the other end of the video call, Nan Gongming's face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Even his voice was trembling, which made Nan Gong Tian feel extremely uneasy. What happened? Nan Gong Tian asked with a trembling voice. However, before Nan Gongming could answer, the video call shook until Yi Xian's face appeared in front of Nan Gong Tian's eyes. Nan Gong Tian's expression changed drastically, and his eyes widened. Yi Xian. Nan Gong Tian yelled in horror. TSK TSK TSK. Master Nan Gong, are you leaving Xia country? In the video call, Yi Xian had a smile on his face as he pointed his phone camera at the members of the Nan Gong family. When Nan Gong Tian saw his daughter lying in a pool of blood, he bit his dry lips and tears flowed uncontrollably from his eyes. Yi Xian, you devil, you inhumane executioner. Nan Gong Tian yelled at the top of his lungs. However, Yi Xian ignored Nan Gong Tian's yelling in the video call. At this moment, a large number of the Nan Gong family members were kneeling on the cold ground. Yi Xian was holding the bloodthirsty demonic sword, and the blood-colored sword looked like it was going to kill them at any moment. I'm curious, how would you choose between your life and the lives of your family members? Yi Xian strolled in front of the Nan Gong family members with a cruel smile on his face. Yi Xian, I beg you, please don't hurt them. I can agree to whatever conditions you have. Nangong Tian looked as if he had aged 10 years. His face was full of tears as he pleaded with Yi Xian on the other end of the phone. TSK, this doesn't seem like Master Nangong's style. When you launched the missile to kill me back then, you risked everything and wanted me to die a horrible death. Yi Xian smiled cruelly. Yi Xian, what do you want? Nangong Tian was almost driven crazy by Yi Xian's torture. He was extremely regretful now. If he knew that this would happen, he wouldn't have provoked Yi Xian. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. Even though Nangong Tian was extremely regretful now, the reality he was facing was telling him that his family members could die in Yi Xian's hands at any moment. I want you to appear in front of me within 10 minutes. Otherwise, I'll kill one person every minute. If I don't see you in 10 minutes, everyone in the Nangong family will die too. Yi Xian's voice was very calm, but Nangong Tian felt a chill down his spine when he heard it. You can't go. If you go, you'll die too. The grim-faced man suddenly appeared beside Nangong Tian and said in an extremely gloomy voice. How could Nangong Tian not know what would happen if he appeared in front of Yi Xian? However, everyone in the Nangong family was in Yi Xian's hands. If he really didn't follow Yi Xian's orders, all of them would die in Yi Xian's hands. 1 minute has passed. All of a sudden, Yi Xian's calm voice came from the video call. Nangong Tian immediately woke up from his thoughts and looked at the video call. Ah! A terrified female voice sounded out. Yi Xian slowly walked over to a middle-aged lady. A strange smile appeared on his face as he looked at Nangong Tiandao. This is your wife, right? No. No. I beg. Unfortunately, without waiting for Nangong Tian to plead, a ruthless expression flashed through Yi Xian's eyes. When he slashed out with his sword, a mournful bloody light blossomed, and a headless corpse collapsed at his feet. Mother! Aunt! Sister! Many sorrowful cries could be heard from the video call. Nangong Tian collapsed to the ground as he witnessed this scene. A mouthful of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Clearly, it was caused by excessive grief. You beast, beast! Nangong Tian's mouth was stained with blood and his voice was hoarse and trembling. Chapter 93. Thud, thud, thud. Yi Xian held the Nangong family tree in his hands as he slowly walked forward until he arrived beside a young man. The bloodthirsty demon's sword was pressed against the young man's chest. He turned around to look at Nangong Tian in the video and said, Nangong Shu, your third son, he's the next to die. Turn off the video and leave Xia country immediately. The masked man's body tensed up when he saw Yi Xian's horrifying methods and roared at Nangong Tian. Unfortunately, Nangong Tian was already in endless pain. He ignored the warning of the masked man and begged Yi Xian, No, I'll go and see you immediately. Time's up. Yi Xian's voice was very calm, but it meant the death of a life. Dad, save me, save me. I don't want to die, poof. The sword pierced through his heart and blood splattered everywhere. Before Nangong Shu could finish his sentence, he fell to the ground and turned into a cold corpse. His eyes were wide open and he was looking at Nangong Tian through the video call. Son, my son. Nangong Tian was in tears and he couldn't stop crying. You still have 8 minutes, you can continue crying, Yi Xian said calmly and walked towards a young woman. She was Nangong Tian's second daughter. No. I'll go and see you now. Nangong Tian was driven crazy by Yi Xian. He yelled at the pilot, take off immediately. Crack. Suddenly, the masked man crushed Nangong Tian's phone and glared at Nangong Tian. You idiot, even if you go, not only will you die, but your Nangong family will also die. Get lost, get lost. Do you know that even if I'm still alive, I'm already old and can't have children anymore? If they're all dead, what's the point of me living alone in this world? Nangong Tian roared as he trembled. Enta, I'm begging you, please help me this time. This is the password of the Nangong family's overseas bank. I'll give you all of my assets, just help me this time. Nangong Tian took out a black card and begged continuously. The masked man clenched his fists as he looked at Nangong Tian, who was in tears. His eyes were extremely gloomy. He took a deep look at Nangong Tian, took the black card, and said to the pilot, "Send him to the Nangong family." Following the masked man's command, the helicopter slowly rose into the air and headed straight for the Nangong family. "Boss, he will definitely die this time. He will definitely expose our whereabouts," a foreign man said worriedly. Ghostface looked at the helicopter that Nangong Tian was in and asked, "Do you know who's the scariest?" "Boss, what are you talking about?" the foreign man asked in confusion. There are two types of people in this world that are the scariest. The first type is people who are righteous and have no regrets even if they die. The second type is people who are cold-blooded and heartless. They will do anything to achieve their goals. Even if they kill everyone in the world, they won't feel guilty at all. Yi Xian is this type of person. He's the scariest. I think we've offended someone that we shouldn't have. The ghost-faced man's voice was extremely bitter, and his aura was slightly dispirited. He believed that he was also a ruthless person, but compared to Yi Xian, he was nothing more than a minor character. Tell everyone that we can't stay in this base any longer. Order everyone to retreat to the second base. The masked man woke up from his bitter state of mind and gave the order to the foreign man. Yes, boss. The foreign man took the order and left. However, the masked man looked in the direction of the Nangong family and was in a daze. At the Nangong family, there was a strong smell of blood in the air and 6 to 7 corpses were lying on the ground. Extreme fear spread throughout the Nangong family. Just as Yi Xian said, Nangong Tian would kill one person for every minute that he delayed. After all, Yi Xian believed that he was a man of his words. Initially, the Nangong family members were screaming and cursing, but now, they were dead silent. Everyone's eyes were filled with fear and despair. This was because Yi Xian was no longer a human in their eyes. He was a cold-blooded and cruel demon. "Daddy, I'm scared." A young child's voice was heard. The child was curled up in Nangong Ming's arms and didn't dare to look at Yi Xian's face. "Don't be scared, don't be scared. Your grandfather will come and save us soon." Nangong Ming comforted the child with a trembling voice. However, he was obviously not confident and there was despair in his eyes. Looking at this scene, Yi Xian's expression didn't change. However, his eyes were as deep as an ancient pond as he strolled towards Nangong Ming and his son. "Little kid, come, let uncle hug you." "Yi Xian, don't touch my son." Nangong Ming screamed in fear. He hugged the child tightly and refused to let go. Unfortunately, Nangong Ming was only a mortal. How could he resist Yi Xian? Under Yi Xian's cold gaze, Nangong Ming snatched the child from Nangong Ming's hands. "Boo-hoo! Bad guy, let go of me! Let go of me!" The child cried loudly and kicked Yi Xian continuously. Obviously, he was frightened by Yi Xian's actions. "Little kid, tell uncle, what's your name?" Yi Xian smiled warmly, but in the eyes of the child, it caused his face to turn deathly pale. His body that was constantly kicking also calmed down. My name is Nangong Ji." The child replied with a trembling voice. Yi Xian nodded slowly. His gaze became even more profound. It was unknown if he was talking to the child or himself. He said, "I have a story. Do you want to hear it?" Without waiting for the child's reply, Yi Xian seemed to have sunk into reminiscence. His voice gradually became low and deep. "Once upon a time, there was a child. His family was very poor. When he was 5 years old, he lost his father. He and his mother relied on each other for survival. On this day, it was the child's 6th birthday. His mother bought a fish and specially made his favorite, braised carp, to celebrate his birthday. On this day, the child was very happy. He ate the fish in large mouthfuls until there was only a pile of fish bones left. Only then did he burp in satisfaction. However, when he walked into the kitchen, he saw his mother quietly eating his leftover fish bones. Listening to Yi Xian's story, the child temporarily forgot his fear. He asked curiously, and then? Yi Xian's eyes were absent-minded. He continued, after half a year, in the dead of winter, under the attack of the wind and snow, the child wore a single layer of clothing and stood guard at the entrance of a restaurant. He watched as a bully ate the fish on the table with big mouthfuls. His eyes were filled with envy. A braised carp was quickly finished by the bully. The bully did not pay and was sent off by the boss flatteringly. However, the child looked at the remaining fish bones and was unwilling to leave. After a great deal of hesitation, he finally ran into the restaurant and stole the plate of fish bones. However, he was discovered by the boss and was beaten black and blue. Why did he steal someone else's leftovers? The child asked suspiciously. Because today is his mother's birthday. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Ah! Listening to Yi Xian's story, the child exclaimed in surprise. His eyes were filled with anger. He said, that boss is so mean. After being scolded and beaten, the boss left. The child finally managed to protect the fish bones in his arms. Enduring the pain all over his body, he brought them home for his mother to eat. However, from that day onwards, the child understood a principle. Humans can only survive in this cruel world by being strong. The weak will be beaten mercilessly like he is today. Yi Xian finished his story at this point. However, the indifferent and emotionless aura around him became stronger. Uncle. Uncle. Are you that child? The child asked in a trembling voice. He seemed to have understood something. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not answer the child's question. He gently placed the child in front of Nan Gongming and said in a low voice, your childhood was undoubtedly happy. However, your Nangong family offended someone you should not have offended. Chapter 94. In the distant horizon, the sound of a propeller could be heard. A helicopter flew across the sky and landed on the Nangong family's lawn. The door of the helicopter opened and Nangong Tian staggered out of the helicopter. He knelt down on the ground and tears flowed out of his eyes when he saw the 6 to 7 cold corpses on the ground. Yi Xian, I'm here. Kill me if you want, but please spare my family's lives. There was no roaring or hysteria. Nangong Tian had even forgotten about the blood feud in front of him. He knelt down and kowtowed to Yi Xian, hoping that Yi Xian would be merciful and spare his family's lives. Clang! Blood swords filled the sky and killing intent filled the air. Under Nangong Tian's hopeless gaze, Yi Xian slashed and more than 10 people from the Nangong family died on the spot. Blood, blood, the beautiful blood stained the ground and screams of despair could be heard. Why? Why? Nangong Tian roared when he saw what was happening. He had never seen such a crazy person who could be so ruthless to the elderly, the weak, the women, and the children. The reason is simple. If I was killed by the missile that day, would you have spared my family's lives? Yi Xian walked forward slowly with the bloodthirsty demon sword in his hand. A life disappeared with every step he took. The blood splattered everywhere and the beautiful sword aura proved that Yi Xian had turned into the Azura Grim Reaper without any human emotions. The strong will always be strong while the weak will always be like dogs. As the head of the Nangong family, there must be many people who have died directly or indirectly in your hands. You should understand such a simple logic better than me. Blood spread and a vicious aura surrounded Yi Xian. When Yi Xian arrived in front of Nangong Tian, all the people from the Nangong family had turned into cold corpses except for Nangong Ming and his son. Yi Xian, I'll eat your flesh and drink your blood even if I turn into a ferocious ghost. Nangong Tian's face was twisted and ferocious, as if he was a demon that had crawled out of hell. Remember, don't meet me in your next life. Otherwise, you will still die without a burial ground. Yi Xian said indifferently. The bloodthirsty demon sword slashed down, and sword chi filled the sky as it shot out. Amidst Nangong Tian's miserable howls, it directly turned into a rain of blood that fell onto the ground. Dad! Grandpa! Nangong Ming and his son burst into tears. As they looked at Yi Xian's back, their eyes were filled with extreme hatred. He abruptly turned around without any ripples. Yi Xian slowly walked towards Nangong Ming and his son. When he arrived beside them, Yi Xian calmly slit Nangong Ming's throat, causing him to die in despair. Uncle! Uncle! Don't! Don't kill me! Please! I beg you! The child cried out as he stumbled backward. Looking at the child in front of him, Yi Xian's expression was calm as he said in a gentle voice, "Child, do you still remember the story I told you just now?" "Yes. Yes." The child said with a trembling voice. "There is no right or wrong in this world. There is only the strong and the weak. You were wrongly born in the Nangong family in this life. I hope that you can live a peaceful life in your next life." A flash of sword light pierced through the child's heart. A drop of blood splattered on Yi Xian's face. He did not wipe it off. Instead, he looked up at the moon in the sky with an indescribable loneliness in his eyes. Yi Xian asked himself, "Why do I feel so terrible when I killed the 6 desires merciless today? Do I pity this child? Or do I feel compassion in my heart? Just a little, just a little." Yi Xian could feel that he almost did not have the heart to kill him just now. Is this an inner demon? Yi Xian mumbled to himself. But if it is an inner demon, why do I not have any signs of qi deviation? Yi Xian did not understand. Yi Xian's consciousness was very clear. He knew that when he stepped onto the path of immortal cultivators, he would have to experience endless slaughter. Today, he had only massacred a family, but it made him feel somewhat gloomy. This kind of situation had never happened to him before. I have long since abandoned the so-called compassion. If I had compassion, I would have only become a corpse under the feet of others on this unrivaled path. I don't kill people, but people want to kill me. As the saying goes, revenge breeds revenge. When will there ever be an end to it? Massacring a family today is the best choice I have made. The 6 desires merciless, heaven and earth have no heart. Yi Xian finally calmed his surging emotions. He took a step forward and disappeared from where he stood. However, at this moment, the Nangong family was engulfed in a monstrous fire. In the capital, the people were in a state of panic. When they woke up in the morning, the citizens of the capital all asked about what happened last night. However, due to the martial law of the Wu and Bureau, not a single piece of information was leaked. As time passed, this matter was gradually suppressed. At the same time, the news of the Nangong family's destruction also spread to the upper echelons of the capital. No one knew who did it until Yi Xian appeared in front of everyone. Many of the upper echelons of the capital were shocked. They did not know how Yi Xian managed to survive these technological weapons. In the courtyard house in the capital, Yi Xian sat on a rocking chair while Ling Long and Tai Li stood on his left and right. Qing Long was constantly reporting something to Yi Xian. "Mr. Yi, all the henchmen of the Nangong family have been eliminated. However, we can't find out where the masked man is." "It's okay. He will surface sooner or later. It won't be too far away," Yi Xian said calmly. When he killed Nangong Tian, Yi Xian already knew that even if he forced Nangong Tian to tell him where the masked man was, the masked man would be gone by the time he went to find him. Why bother? Although Yi Xian did not know where the masked man was, he already had some guesses in his heart. Since this person had been hiding in the capital all this time, he could not be a nobody. Furthermore, in Yi Xian's heart, he had already sentenced this person to death. This was because as long as they were his enemies, they would only end up dead. Mr. Yi, there's one more thing. Right now, all the major families and some ancient martial artists want to visit you. Do you want to see them? Qing Long probed. Obviously, the battle between Yi Xian and Li Huantian had completely established Yi Xian's reputation. Whether it was the upper echelons of the capital or the ancient martial artists, they were all deeply respectful of Yi Xian. Naturally, they wanted to get closer to him. I like peace and quiet. Tell them not to bother me. I understand. Qing Long nodded as if he had already guessed Yi Xian's attitude. Qing Long, help me arrange something. I want to see Shui Jie alone. As Yi Xian finished speaking, Qing Long was stunned. He looked at Yi Xian with a slightly strange expression. He also looked troubled. If it were someone else, Qing Long would definitely agree. However, this lady Shui Jie's identity was not simple. Even the big shots attached great importance to her. If Yi Xian had a conflict with this lady Shui Jie, things would be a little difficult to handle. Mr. Yi, I'll do my best. As for whether Lady Shui Jie will see you or not, I can't guarantee it, Qing Long said slightly uneasily. Ha! A strange and inexplicable look flashed across Yi Xian's eyes. He murmured, she will see me. I'm afraid she's already prepared. For some reason, Qing Long's body suddenly tensed up when he saw Yi Xian's appearance. A feeling of uneasiness appeared in his heart. He could only smile flatteringly and forcefully suppress this uneasiness. However, he kept praying in his heart that Yi Xian would not do anything out of line to Shui Jie. Chapter 95. Heaven and earth were boundless, and the universe was vast. In the long river of history, humans were never alone. Many unknown existences had witnessed this vast history with humans. Immortals, demons, and devils. These were 5 different life forms. Not to mention the other forms, just the legend of demons had been passed down since ancient times. It could be said that it had always been a hot topic in people's mouths. Everything had spirits, and heaven and earth were born. No matter if it was grass, trees, mountains, rocks, birds, or beasts, if they could gain intelligence, they could gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and absorb the essence of the sun and moon. These life forms also had a common name, demons. In the suburbs of the capital, in the nameless mountain range. It was the beginning of spring, and everything was recovering. The mountain was covered in lush green vegetation, giving people a feeling of prosperity. A cool breeze blew, bringing with it the fragrance of plants. Above the mountain peak, a sea of clouds lingered. A bamboo forest swayed in the clouds, and a simple stone house stood in the middle of the bamboo forest. It made people feel as if they were in a fairyland. In the stone house, Shui Jie was dressed in a white palace gauze, and her hair was tied into a bun. Her lips were bright red, and there was a cinnabar dot between her eyebrows. She gave people an extremely stunning and cold temperament. Dong! The sound of the zither was like water, and it was like the sound of a fairy. After the ancient fairy tune was played, Shui Jie's hands left the zither, and for the first time, she looked at the person in front of her. Mr. Yi, although I am the leader of the desolate group, I have always lived in seclusion deep in the mountains. I rarely pay attention to the trivial matters of the mortal world. Why do you have to force me? Shui Jie's beauty could be described as a peerless beauty. She was looking at Yi Xian pitifully, giving people an impulse to hold her in their arms and protect her. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was not moved. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was only indifference in his eyes when he looked at Shui Jie. Humans have their own ways, demons have their own ways. Your bewitching trick may work on others, but to me, you are just showing off your slight skill in front of an expert. Yi Xian smiled contemptuously. When he opened and closed his eyes, the terrifying bloody light seemed to solidify, and the surrounding void faintly sounded with the cries of dead souls. An extremely terrifying evil aura suppressed Xue Jie. Bang! The wooden zither exploded, and the void exploded. The snow girl's expression changed slightly. A dim light flashed on her body, and she disappeared from the stone house in an eerie manner. Mr. Yi, I have no intention of becoming your enemy, but I'm not afraid of you. Xue Ji's tender voice resounded from all directions in the void. It contained a faint trace of anger. Wisps of white smoke rose from the stone house and instantly engulfed Yi Xian. You dare to take out a mere spirit-trapping array to embarrass yourself? Yi Xian laughed coldly. When he struck out with his palm, the entire stone house exploded. A slender figure let out a muffled groan and fled out of the stone house. You want to leave? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. His two sword fingers slashed through the air, seemingly crossing the barrier of time and space. He slashed out a resplendent sword qi, which immediately caused Xue Jie to cry out in pain. Buzz! Yi Xian suddenly appeared in the middle of the bamboo forest. His sparkling and translucent jade-like palm directly grabbed onto Xue Ji's pure white neck. When his eyes opened and closed, a sinister killing intent emerged. Little beast, you've only just entered the Foundation establishment realm. You want to fight against me? If you tell me the secret of turning into a demon, I'll let you live. If you don't know what's good for you, don't blame me for destroying your body and soul so that you'll never be reincarnated. Yi Xian was domineering, violent, and unreasonable. He directly used his strength to suppress her. He had no pity for her at all. You really are a cultivator. Xue Jie's face turned red, and her voice trembled. Yi Xian wasn't surprised that Xue Ji had seen through his identity. After all, the other party's life force was that of a demon and had a sharp intuition towards cultivators. Yi Xian didn't even think of hiding himself in front of Xue Ji. Tell me, why can you turn into a demon? How many demon clans are there in this world? Yi Xian said in an icy voice. Let go of me. I'll tell you, Xue Jie said with difficulty. That's right. As long as you're obedient, I won't hurt you. Yi Xian let go of Xue Jie and gently helped her tidy up her wrinkled gauze. The warm smile on his face was very amiable. However, when Xue Jie saw this, she felt a chill run down her spine. She stepped back and kept a safe distance from Yi Xian. Temperamental, vicious, and ruthless. These were the feelings that Yi Xian gave her. When facing someone like Yi Xian, although Xue Jie was a demon, she was clearly afraid of Yi Xian. After hesitating for a long time, Xue Ji's expression kept changing, as if she was hesitating about something. During this time, Yi Xian didn't disturb him in the slightest. He believed that Xue Ji would give him a satisfactory answer. Come with me. After a dozen breaths of time, Xue Jie's expression became firm as if she had made a decision. She walked towards the cliff. Yi Xian slowly followed behind her. A sea of clouds curled around the peak of the mountain. Further ahead was a bottomless abyss. Xue Jie did not stop. She directly leapt into the air and jumped down the cliff. Such a scene made Yi Xian narrow his eyes. Could this woman's secret be at the bottom of the cliff? Without the slightest hesitation or fear of any traps, Yi Xian took a step forward and dove down towards the bottom of the cliff. At the bottom of the cliff, an old cave was firmly blocked by a huge rock. When Xue Ji moved the huge rock away, a wisp of spiritual light suddenly gushed out from the cave, causing Yi Xian's eyes to be stunned. A strange expression flashed through his eyes. Mr. Yi, please. Under Xue Jie's guidance, the two of them directly entered the cave. There was a completely different world within the cave. When the two of them went deep into the belly of the mountain, a clear spring water with a faint amount of spirit energy was directly reflected in Yi Xian's eyes. Breathing in the thin amount of spirit energy, Yi Xian immediately felt refreshed. His cultivation even faintly showed signs of fluctuation. Mr. Yi, I was originally a white lotus in this spiritual spring. Because I absorbed the spiritual qi in the spring water, it took me 500 years to turn into a demon. This is my secret, Xue Jie said sincerely. Hearing Xue Jie's words, Yi Xian slowly walked until he came to the side of the spiritual spring. When he inhaled and exhaled, an extremely thin spiritual qi was sucked into his mouth and nose. When Xue Jie saw this scene, she immediately felt a pain in her heart. However, she did not dare to say anything. It really is a spiritual spring. Unfortunately, this spiritual spring is just a drop in the bucket for me. Yi Xian closed his eyes and felt it. When he opened his eyes, a trace of disappointment appeared in his eyes. Perhaps some people would ask why Yi Xian forced Xue Jie to reveal the secret of her demon transformation. In fact, Yi Xian's purpose was to find the source of the spiritual qi in hopes of improving his cultivation. One must know that Yi Xian was able to become an immortal cultivator because he cultivated the immortal scripture and experienced 4 years of bloody battles in the Blood Sea battlefield. Only then did he have the cultivation of the crossing calamity stage. By absorbing the blood soul essence, his cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. This kind of cultivation speed was 1 in a billion in the legendary Earth Immortal world, let alone in the world of Dharma ending. Struggling between life and death and recovering from death, no one understood the meaning of life better than Yi Xian. Not only did he want to live well, but he also had a great ambition in his heart. He wanted to become an immortal in the boundless secular world. Chapter 96. Why did the Blood Sea battlefield exist? What was the cause of the ancient war? Who was Yuan Mo? What did Yuan Ling and the Blood Sea Phantom want from him? Was the legendary Earth God's realm really behind that door? There was a thick fog in front of him, full of unknowns and uncertainties. Yi Xian was not arrogant enough to think that he was the protagonist of heaven and earth, nor did he have any so-called luck. Perhaps if he made a mistake, he would be consigned to eternal damnation and never be reincarnated. This was definitely not something that Yi Xian wanted to see. Perhaps some people had forgotten that Yi Xian was ruthless, insidious, and gave people a sense of maturity. However, he was only 18 years old this year. Other people grew up happily under the protection of their parents at the age of 18, but Yi Xian embarked on a path full of blood and thorns at the age of 18. This path was rugged and difficult, but it was Yi Xian's only choice. This was because Yi Xian did not want to die. He just wanted to live well. When he slaughtered the Nangong family, Yi Xian killed the last child, and there was a wave in his heart. This was clearly a sign that his inner demon was about to arise. Yi Xian had never experienced such a thing. Logically speaking, Yi Xian's cultivation was obtained by devouring blood souls and essence. Under the effect of the Immortal Sutra, he reached the tribulation stage and did not need much spirit qi. However, there were gains and losses in this world. Although his cultivation had increased rapidly, it was also because there was no spirit qi in his body to suppress it. When his inner demon came, there would be a great change. Mr. Yi Xian, the spirit spring will dry up in 3 years. If you want to take it, I can give it to you. Seeing that Yi Xian was silent, Xue Jie spoke up at the right time to test him. Yi Xian returned from his thoughts and looked at Xue Jie with an increasingly deep gaze. This made Xue Jie's body tense up and she felt extremely nervous. No need. Suddenly turning around, Yi Xian floated away. This also made Xue Jie feel relieved. However, looking at Yi Xian's back, a strange look flashed across her eyes. Wang! The spring water rippled, and the spiritual energy rose. The snow girl shook her body and turned into a white lotus, taking root in the center of the spiritual spring. The whole stone cave fell into silence. Separated by the heavens and earth, it was impervious to all magic. As a cultivator in the crossing calamity realm, Yi Xian could easily cover his tracks. He blended into the void and returned directly. When he saw the snow girl's original white lotus form, a strange bloody light flashed across his eyes. That's right, Yi Xian had no intention of leaving because he didn't trust Shui Jie from the very beginning. As an immortal cultivator, Yi Xian might not have come into contact with spiritual energy, but he knew some common sense. The spiritual energy in the spring water was extremely thin. How could Shui Jie transform into a human in merely 500 years? Yi Xian was very sure that Shui Jie had an expert guiding her from behind, and this person was the key to turning her into a demon. Yi Xian was never short of patience. He sat cross-legged in the void and looked at the white lotus in the spring water calmly, quietly waiting for the person behind the snow girl to appear. Time passed quickly, and 7 days passed. Ripples appeared in the spring water, and the white lotus turned into Shui Jie. She walked out of the cave slowly without making contact with anyone. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed as he looked at everything before him. He couldn't help but ask himself, could it be that he'd guessed wrongly? Wait. Yi Xian trusted his intuition. He believed that there must be a big problem in this important place. It was just that he hadn't discovered it yet. The sun rose and the moon set. Time passed day by day in a cycle. Shui Jie either cultivated in the stone cave or went back to the bamboo forest to play the zither. Other than that, she didn't do anything unusual. This state lasted for a whole month. After such a long time, Yi Xian began to have doubts in his heart. Was I too suspicious and this woman didn't lie to me? On this day, Shui Jie appeared in the stone cave again with an extremely solemn expression. She had set up many spiritual formations around the spring water. When Yi Xian saw this scene, his eyes suddenly lit up. He knew that he hadn't guessed wrong. This Shui Jie was indeed strange. Master. Shui Jie knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the void. Buzz. The void rippled and a white-robed Confucian scholar appeared, floating up and down in the void. I didn't expect that there would be cultivators in this world. Fortunately, my primordial spirit scattered into the void. Otherwise, if it was discovered by him, I'm afraid there would be unexpected problems. The white-robed Confucian scholar sighed. Master, you ordered me to stay in the room for a month. Was it to prevent this person from returning? Shui Jie asked. You've just entered the foundation establishment stage. How could you understand the horror of cultivators? Although I can't see through this person's cultivation, I'm sure he's spying on you in the dark. As the saying goes, it's better to be safe than sorry. After a month, he should have already left, the white-robed Confucian scholar said with certainty. Unfortunately, if the two of them knew that Yi Xian hadn't left and had been waiting here for a whole month, what would they think? In the void, Yi Xian sat cross-legged and looked indifferently at the white-robed Confucian scholar. A strange light kept flickering in his eyes. Primordial spirit? Yi Xian believed that he hadn't seen wrong. This white-robed Confucian scholar was indeed the primordial spirit of a cultivator. However, he had lost his physical body and was struggling at death's door because of this pool of spiritual spring water. Master, you once said that without the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, cultivators couldn't exist in this world. Why isn't this person affected? Shui Jie asked. The white-robed Confucian scholar's body was illusory, but when he opened and closed his eyes, there was excitement in them. This person's cultivation is extremely high, but he's been haunted by vengeful souls and there's no spiritual chi in his body. If I'm not wrong, his cultivation is obtained by devouring the blood and chi of living creatures. It's similar to the blood and chi transportation method I created years ago. Clap, clap, clap. All of a sudden, a burst of applause came, and the two of them changed their expressions greatly. They looked toward the source of the sound. The air stirred and the void changed. Under the two's horrified gazes, Yi Xian revealed himself and looked at the white-robed Confucian scholar with a smile. I've always believed that this world is very, very big. In the vast river of history, there are always some peerless geniuses who stand out and amaze all living things and become the protagonists of an era. After Yi Xian said this, he paused for a moment. His voice was strange as he said, I presume you're one of them, right? Time seemed to stop and space seemed to be frozen. When Yi Xian's appearance came into their eyes, Shui Jiayi's face was pale and her soul seemed to have left her body. The white-robed Confucian scholar's face was bitter and there was a touch of despair in his eyes. Yi Xian, don't mess around. All of a sudden, the solemn atmosphere was broken. Shui Jiayi instantly stood in front of the white-robed Confucian scholar and looked at Yi Xian with a desperate look. Chapter 97. Shui Ji, you may leave now. The white-robed Confucian said bitterly, which startled Shui Ji. She said, Master, you. If Brother Yu wanted to harm us, would you and I still be in one piece? You may leave now. The white-robed Confucian smiled bitterly. I'm Lu Bai. Nice to meet you, Brother Yi. The white-robed Confucian walked forward and bowed to Yi Xian. His way of bowing was very old-fashioned. Obviously, he was not from this era. Lu Bai. Yi Xian murmured to himself. A thought flashed through his mind. Isn't this the name of the Taoist genius from Mount Longhu? At the Table family's villa, Yi Xian used a soul-searching technique on Elder Ghost. From his memories, he found out that a Taoist genius had once appeared in Mount Longhu and created the blood-qi transfer technique. As for the name of this Taoist genius, he was called Lu Bai. Brother Yi, have you heard of my name? Lu Bai asked curiously. In the end of the world, there was no spiritual qi. 500 years ago, a Taoist genius appeared in Mount Longhu. He took a different path and cultivated both Taoist and martial arts. He even created the blood and qi transfer method, wanting to recreate the golden age of cultivation. This person, you are you, right? Yi Xian slowly spoke. Lu Bai's face was filled with astonishment. In the end, his face was filled with bitterness as he said, the world deified me, but in the end, my body withered and my primordial spirit left my body. The so-called great Tao of immortal cultivation is just a delusion. Lu Bai paused for a moment and continued, but I didn't expect Brother Yi to be so scheming. You actually waited here for more than a month for me to appear. Yi Xian smiled and said, in fact, I'm not sure if Shui Ji has a master behind her, but now it seems that my guess is very correct. The two of them asked and answered each other. They seemed to be very harmonious. They even called each other brothers, as if they were close friends who had not seen each other for many years. However, in Lu Bai's eyes, he was already prepared to die. This was because he was also a cultivator before his death. Although he was only in the golden core stage, he knew what would happen when a cultivator's primordial spirit was exposed in front of another cultivator. Even in the legendary Earth Immortal world, the primordial spirit of an immortal cultivator was a great supplement. Lu Bai knew very well that Yi Xian would never let him go. Brother Yi, a straightforward person doesn't resort to insinuations. Since I've been exposed to you, I also know what kind of fate I'll face. I only ask that you let Shui Ji go and let her go. Lu Bai bowed and said. Yi Xian could completely sense the other's despair. This also caused him to smile warmly, and he said, your nascent spirit is indeed a great tonic, but it is completely useless to me. Also, you may have misunderstood. I waited for you to appear this time just to ask Brother Lu some questions. Looking at the warm smile on Yi Xian's face, Lu Bai did not dare to treat Yi Xian as a kind person. After hearing about Yi Xian's deeds from Shui Ji, Lu Bai deeply understood that the person in front of him was an extremely sinister and ruthless person. If he treated him as a kind person, he would not even know how he died. I wonder what Brother Yi wants to ask. Lu Bai cautiously asked. Buzz. Yi Xian's palm and fingers were like clouds, and a gentle breeze brushed past his face. With a slap, Shuiji fainted directly on the ground. This also caused Lu Bai's expression to change greatly. The spiritual light around his body instantly surged, and his eyes were extremely cold as he looked at Yi Xian. Don't worry, I didn't hurt her. I just made her sleep for a while, Yi Xian said calmly. Brother Yi, what do you want to do? Lu Bai's expression was complicated. He completely could not understand what Yi Xian was thinking. Boom! Like a thunderclap from the ninth heaven, and like the humming of the luminous stars, Yi Xian suddenly released an extremely terrifying aura. The blood-red light around his body continued to boil, and Lu Bai's expression changed greatly. He staggered back and looked at Yi Xian with an unprecedented horror. You, what is your cultivation level? Lu Bai asked in a trembling voice. Yi Xian's blood-red eyes were as if they were solid. His voice rumbled in Lu Bai's ears, immortal cultivators cultivate their fate and go against the heavens. As the saying goes, there are 9 heavens in the path of immortality, and each step leads to a new heaven. I am standing at the 8th heaven. What do you think my cultivation level is? Cross calamity stage. Lu Bai trembled as he muttered to himself. However, he immediately refuted Yi Xian with a roar, no, impossible. Not to mention that it is the end of the world. Even if the world was perfect. You are so young, it is impossible for you to enter the cross-calamity stage, Buzz. It was as if the stars were falling, as if the sun and moon were hanging upside down. The void was shaking, and blood was bursting out. An extremely terrifying thing happened. Yi Xian's glabella was glowing, and the wailing of dead souls was heard from the void. A 3-inch man walked out from his glabella, and a destructive aura burst out. Lu Bai was paralyzed on the ground as if he was scared out of his wits. Cross-calamity stage immortal soul. Is this the cross-calamity stage immortal soul mentioned in the ancient records? Lu Bai murmured in a trembling voice. If he had not seen this scene with his own eyes, he would not have believed that he had seen something from the legends. High in the sky, in the void. Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged. A cool breeze blew, causing his black hair to flutter in the wind, giving him an elegant and otherworldly feeling. Is the inner demon tribulation really so terrifying? Yi Xian murmured in a low voice. It had been 5 days since Yi Xian and Lu Bai parted ways. Recalling the conversation between the two, Yi Xian frowned deeply. When Lu Bai learned that Yi Xian was at the cross-calamity stage, he was so scared that he fell to the ground. He finally understood why Yi Xian did not care about his vital spirit. After the initial panic, Lu Bai finally showed his talent. He discussed Tao with Yi Xian for 3 days and 3 nights. Both of them could be said to have gained a lot. Yi Xian deeply understood that although his cultivation was strong and he was only 1 step away from becoming an immortal, he was not as knowledgeable as Lu Bai about the most basic immortal cultivation theory. Lu Bai was different. When he was alive, he was a Taoist genius of Mount Longhu. 500 years after his death, his vital spirit remained in the world and he studied immortal cultivation day and night. He could answer many of Yi Xian's questions about immortal cultivation. Moreover, Yi Xian was not stupid enough to return to the Blood Sea battlefield and ask Yuan Ling about his own problems. After all, the two were enemies, not friends. Sooner or later, a great battle would break out. Yi Xian was not arrogant, and he was not ashamed to ask for advice. He did not look down on Lu Bai because of his weak cultivation. It was also because of Yi Xian's attitude that Lu Bai was moved. To be able to get a dignified tribulation stage cultivator to consult him, just this kind of honor was enough to wake Lu Bai up with a smile even in his sleep. When Yi Xian mentioned the breeding of inner demons, Lu Bai directly answered him. He had once read in an ancient book that in the distant past, there were devil cultivators who killed a lot of people. Their bodies were surrounded by resentful souls. When the inner demons broke out, they would face the danger of death. There were only 3 ways to solve the inner demons. The first was to find a spiritual treasure to suppress the inner demons. The second was to practice the Buddhist art of exorcism. Naturally, the inner demons would not breed. However, these 2 methods had a great drawback. That was, one's cultivation would be stagnant and there would be no possibility of further progress in one's life. Naturally, these 2 methods were not within Yi Xian's scope of consideration. Chapter 98. As for the third method, it was to rely on oneself to overcome the inner demon tribulation. If one could overcome it, one's cultivation would improve qualitatively. If one failed to overcome it, one would naturally die and not even have the chance to reincarnate. Yi Xian was not depressed when he heard this answer from Lu Bai. Since he already knew that the inner demon tribulation was unavoidable, Yi Xian could only face it calmly. He also believed that he could overcome this tribulation with his own perseverance. In the past 3 days, Yi Xian and Lu Bai talked a lot, and also vaguely mentioned the matter of becoming an immortal. According to Lu Bai's inference, Yi Xian had already embarked on the path of devouring blood and qi. Although this kind of cultivation method was extremely fast, the drawbacks were also very obvious. Because Yi Xian had killed too many people, the vengeful spirits around him were wrapped in a vicious aura. When Yi Xian broke through to the tribulation transcendent stage, these vengeful spirits would probably erupt together and usher in the most terrifying heavenly tribulation in history. Lu Bai was indeed a genius of Taoism. He told Yi Xian that although he had lost his physical body, he had studied the way of immortality day and night for the past 500 years. He had also created a set of formation that could conceal the mysteries of heaven. Perhaps it could help Yi Xian when he crossed the immortal tribulation. However, this set of formation was still in its embryonic form. As long as he was given another 10 years, Lu Bai guaranteed that he could perfect it. In exchange, Lu Bai's request was very simple. He hoped that Yi Xian could find a suitable physical body for him and let him reappear in the world again. This condition could be said to be simple, but it was also very difficult. In order to find a suitable physical body, one had to be at the golden core stage to accommodate Lu Bai's primordial spirit. But how could there be a golden core stage cultivator in this world? The sun rose and the moon set, and the stars moved. Yi Xian woke up from his thoughts and waved away his troubled thoughts. When he opened and closed his eyes, a touch of blood flashed across his eyes. He quickly made a decision in his heart. Lu Bai's talent was peerless, and he would definitely be of great use to him. From the way he talked, it could be seen that he was a person who was infatuated with immortal cultivation and had extraordinary talent in immortal cultivation. In the future, he would be a great help to him. Of course, although Yi Xian thought highly of this person, he was extremely suspicious. Naturally, he would not completely trust Lu Bai. Before he left, he even planted a blood talisman in this person's body. With just a thought, he could destroy this person's soul. It's time to go back. Yi Xian stood up in the air. When he took a step forward, he turned into a streak of blood-red light and shot towards the capital. Capital city, a courtyard house. Yi Xian stood in front of the gate, his expression extremely gloomy. This courtyard house was his residence in the capital. But what did Yi Xian see now? 2 wreaths were placed in front of the gate, and a large, memorial, character was pasted on the iron gate. There was also a pair of elegiac couplets hanging on both sides of the gate. It was obvious that someone in the family had passed away. But Yi Xian's family was all in Jiangnan, and this courtyard house was only his temporary residence. Who would be so bold as to mess with him? Yi Xian's expression was gloomy. He strode forward and pushed open the iron gate. As the iron gate was pushed open, Yi Xian looked around. The courtyard was filled with yellow paper money, and there were white paper dolls everywhere. It gave off an extremely gloomy feeling. Ignoring these depressing things, Yi Xian stepped into the main hall. But when he entered the main hall, a brand new memorial tablet came into view. This also made Yi Xian's expression freeze. He stared at the few large words on the memorial tablet as if he could not take his eyes off it. The memorial tablet was inscribed with a few large words: beloved daughter, Yi Ling, mother, Han Qiuyun. Impossible. Yi Xian stared at the memorial tablet in front of him. His voice was extremely cold. When he opened and closed his eyes, an extremely terrifying blood-red light spread out, and the surrounding void rippled. The scene in front of him caused Yi Xian's mind to fluctuate greatly. He could not believe what he was seeing. After a full 10 minutes, Yi Xian gradually came back to his senses. He quickly took out his phone and pressed the power button until the phone screen lit up. Hundreds of missed calls and text messages appeared before his eyes. Mother Yi, Qinglong, Xia Qingzhu, Yun Mengyao, and many unknown numbers. Looking at the missed calls on his phone, Yi Xian's expression became even gloomier. The blood-red light around him could not be controlled, and a great sense of uneasiness rose in his heart. It had been 2 months since Yi Xian left the capital. During this period of time, in order to not be disturbed by outsiders, Yi Xian turned off his phone. But when he returned to the capital again, he encountered such a strange situation. He quickly opened the unread messages. When the messages were reflected in Yi Xian's eyes, an extremely terrifying blood-red light shot out in all directions with Yi Xian as the center. Rumble. The earth shook violently, and the surrounding houses collapsed instantly as if a magnitude 10 earthquake had occurred. Boom! The sound of a sky-high explosion came, as if the waves of the vast sea were surging. Yi Xian's face was ferocious. He turned into a blood-red cloud and rushed directly into the sky, disappearing from the destroyed courtyard house. Yi family ancestral home, inner hall. A crystal coffin was placed in the middle of the inner hall. Yi Ling seemed to be asleep as she lay quietly in the crystal coffin, as if she would never wake up. Around the inner hall, the father and son of the Yi family were full of worry. Qinglong was beside Mother Yi, and his expression was extremely gloomy. Only Mother Ye's eyes were lifeless, as if she had become a walking corpse. Her 2 eyes stared blankly at Yi Ling, in the coffin. Her face was haggard. Auntie, have something to eat. Yun Mengyao brought a bowl of bird's nest porridge and called out to Mother Yi softly. Mother, you haven't eaten for 3 days. Eat something. Looking at Mother Ye's haggard face, Yi Ping couldn't bear to see it. Qiuyun, Ling's body has been here for a month. Why don't we bury her? Yi Tsonghao persuaded Mother Yi with a complicated expression. No. No. Mother Ye's eyes were filled with tears. She seemed to be in a daze. She choked and said, Ling won't die. She won't die. I have to wait for Xian to come back. He will definitely save Ling Qiuyun, the dead can't be brought back to life. You, sigh. Yi Tsanghai sighed and couldn't continue speaking. Rumble. All of a sudden. It was as if the mountains and rivers had collapsed, as if the stars had fallen. The sky outside completely darkened. Endless lightning intertwined in the clouds, and an extremely terrifying explosion reverberated in all directions. Boundless hostility and murderous intent filled the sky. A blood-red meteor swooped down from the sky. Following the explosion, the entire Yi family ancestral home shook violently. It also made the faces of everyone in the inner hall change. They didn't know what had happened. Dong! 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 Every step was like a mountain or a river. Murderous intent filled the sky. Yi Xian walked slowly, and a mournful bloody light surrounded his body. When he stepped into the Yi family's inner hall and saw Yi Ling in the crystal coffin, he stopped in his tracks. Chapter 99. Yi Xian. Mr. Yi. Big. Big brother. When Yi Xian appeared in front of everyone, there were many exclamations. Boom! He took a step forward and the ground exploded. Before the crowd could react, Yi Xian had already appeared in front of the father and son of the Yi family. Under their horrified gazes, Yi Xian lifted the father and son of the Yi family into the air. How did my sister die? Why did my family appear in capital city? Yi Xian's voice was like the nine nether and his face was like the king of hell. He gripped the necks of the father and son of the Yi family with both hands, causing their faces to turn purple. It was as if Yi Xian would break their necks in the next moment. Big brother, this matter has nothing to do with father and grandfather, Yi Xian said with a trembling voice and quickly walked towards Yi Xian. Do you believe that I will really kill you if you take another step forward? Yi Xian turned around and looked at Yi Ping. When he opened and closed his eyes, a terrifying bloody light spread out. His sinister gaze instantly made Yi Ping stop in his tracks as his body trembled uncontrollably. Mr. Yi, this matter really has nothing to do with the Yi family. It's Qing Long's fault for failing to protect you. Please punish me. Qing Long looked ashamed and immediately knelt on the ground. Xian, let them go. Yi Xian's mother said weakly, making Yi Xian's expression stiffen. He took a deep look at the father and son of the Yi family before throwing them on the ground. Mother. Yi Xian tried his best to suppress his terrifying aura and quickly walked towards Yi Xian's mother, only to see her lifeless eyes. Xian, you save Ling Er. Mother. I beg you. Yi Xian's mother grabbed Yi Xian's arm tightly and fainted because of her agitation. Supporting Yi Xian's body, Yi Xian took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. His ferocious and sinister face gradually calmed down, and a smile gradually appeared on his face. However, when one looked at him, one would feel a bone-chilling coldness. If the creatures in the battlefield saw Yi Xian's expression, they would scream and flee in all directions. This was because this was the unique smile of the undying heavenly sovereign. Whenever this smile appeared on Yi Xian's face, it meant that something terrible was about to happen. Teacher Yun, please help my mother back to her room to rest. Yi Xian didn't ask why Yun Mengyao was here. He handed the unconscious Mother Yi to Yun Mengyao. Yun Mengyao nodded and supported Mother Yi to walk into the room. In the inner hall, the father and son of the Yi family were lying on the ground, panting heavily. Clearly, Yi Xian had almost killed the two of them just now. The father and son of the Yi family had not recovered from the shock even after a long time. At this moment, they were still in deep fear. Yi Ping's face was pale, and he didn't dare to interrupt at this time. Qing Long had been kneeling on the ground, and because of his guilt, he didn't dare to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian strolled to the front of the crystal coffin with a smile on his face. He quietly looked at Yi Ling Er, who seemed to be asleep in the coffin, and didn't say anything for a long time. Qing Long, tell me what happened. After a full 10 minutes, Yi Xian said softly. Mr. Yi, a month ago. Qing Long said bitterly as he looked at Yi Xian's back and slowly told him what happened. A month ago. Because Yi Xian hadn't returned home for a long time, Mother Yi missed Yi Xian. At Yi Ling Er's suggestion, the family took a plane to capital city to visit Yi Xian. The Yi family originally wanted to ease their relationship with Yi Xian, and they also learned from Yi Ping that Yi Xian's mother had come to capital city. Naturally, they made a lot of preparations, hoping to get Mother Ye's forgiveness so that Yi Xian and his mother could return to the Yi family. When Qing Long got the news that Mother Yi had come to capital city, he personally led people to pick her up at the airport. Under the solemn and cautious reception of the two parties, there was still an attack on Yi Xian's family. When Mother Yi and the others just got off the plane, dozens of thugs appeared out of nowhere, holding a large number of high-tech weapons, and wanted to kill Mother Yi and the others at the airport. Fortunately, the Yi family and Qing Long had a large number of ancient martial arts ability users with them, and they engaged in a life-and-death battle with these thugs. However, The other party was already prepared, and the Yi family and Qing Long's people suffered heavy casualties. If it wasn't for the fact that Yi Xian had refined 2 jade sword pendants for Mother Yi and Yi Linger, allowing them to erupt with the might of a Xiantian realm martial artist at a critical moment, Mother Yi, Azure Dragon, and the others would have died on the spot in that battle. How could human strength resist high-tech weapons? Although the 2 jade sword pendants killed a large number of thugs, Yi Linger was still shot in the heart by a laser weapon and died. Under the protection of the remaining people, Mother Yi and the others safely left the airport. After that, the Wu-An Bureau was mobilized to continuously track down the person behind the attack, but they couldn't find any clues. For the safety of Yi Xian and the others, Mother Yi and the others temporarily stayed in the Yi family. After all, the Yi family was located in a military compound, and there were heavy guards all around. The Wu-An Bureau also sent a large number of ancient martial arts ability users to protect the safety of Yi Xian's family day and night. During this period, Qing Long and the others kept calling Yi Xian, but he couldn't pick up, and the messages they sent were like stones in the sea. Originally, Yi Ling should have been buried early, but under Mother Ye's strong insistence, she hoped to wait for Yi Xian to come back and see his sister one last time before holding the funeral. Thus, the scene that Yi Xian saw before happened. After Qing Long finished narrating the incident, the entire inner hall also quieted down. However, Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he quietly looked at Yi Linger in the crystal coffin. When his eyes opened and closed, a bloody light flashed across. Yi Xian, it's because I didn't protect her well that Linger met with this disaster. If you want to kill someone, kill me. Yi Canghai said with a trembling voice. Bang! All of a sudden, Yi Xian slapped out with his palm, and the crystal coffin lid was directly pushed open. An ice-cold aura assaulted his face. It was obvious that this crystal coffin had a freezing technique, which was why it was able to preserve Yi Linger's body so well. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Yi Xian gently stroked Yi Linger's cheek and said in a gentle voice, "Little sister, sleep a little longer. It won't be long before I wake you up. Mr. Yi, the dead can't be brought back to life. My condolences," Qing Long said with a trembling voice. Clearly, he thought that Yi Xian was saying such nonsense because he was too sad. "Big brother, it's better to bury little sister as soon as possible." Yi Ping choked. "Yi Xian, although you don't acknowledge me as your father, Linger is still my daughter after all. I'll personally take care of her funeral. Consider it as making up for all the wrong I've done to Linger all these years," Yi Canghao pleaded with a trembling voice. He suddenly turned around. The blood light around Yi Xian's body was like an illusion as it gradually covered his body. He slowly walked towards the outside world, and his ancient and lonely voice sounded out in the inner hall. "I will definitely return within 3 months. Linger's body must be preserved completely. If anything happens to her body by the time I return, your Yi family will be buried with her." The bloody light spread and rushed into the sky. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Yi Xian stepped into the sky and suddenly disappeared from everyone's sight. Mr. Yi, what are you going to do?" Qing Long murmured in shock. Can Big Brother bring Linger back to life?" Yi Ping said in horror. "Nonsense, how can a dead person be brought back to life? Even the legendary immortals don't have this ability." Yi Canghao reprimanded softly, but there was still a look of confusion in his eyes. In the thousands of miles of sky, the void exploded. A bloody stream of light tore through the endless sky and rushed towards the direction of Heartbreak Mountain. Heartbreak Mountain, Blood Sea Battlefield, Yuan Ling, Undying Immortal Sutra. Yi Xian's mind was filled with thoughts. Although he was an immortal cultivator in the Tribulation Transcendence stage and indeed did not have the ability to bring Yi Linger back to life, Yi Xian was very sure that Yuan Ling, who was in the Blood Sea battlefield, was mysterious and had the Undying Immortal Sutra in his hands. He definitely had a way to bring Yi Linger back to life. Chapter 100. Heartbreak Mountain, Blood Sea Battlefield. The muddy yellow sky, the blood-colored muddy ground, and countless white bones were scattered all over the ground. There was also an extremely dense smell of blood drifting in the air, giving people a nauseating feeling. Splash! On both sides of the blood sea, all living creatures were dead silent. Only the long river of blood flowed and produced the sound of huge waves. At the end of the blood sea, a bronze gate stood there as if it had been standing there since ancient times. It gave people a sense of vicissitudes. A bronze scripture was suspended high in the sky, sealing the shattered spatial barrier. A black shadow was sitting cross-legged here, making it impossible to see what he looked like. Swish! A ray of bloody flowing light cut through the endless sky and quietly appeared in front of the shadow. Yuanling, I need your help. Yi Xian went straight to the point and did not waste any time. The boundless secular world, the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Are you not tired of it? Yuanling opened his eyes and said in a cold voice. Are you going to help me or not? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and said. What is it? Yuanling rose from the void and looked directly at Yi Xian with his bright eyes. A deep look flashed across his eyes. I want to know how the dead can be revived. After Yi Xian finished speaking, Yuanling held his breath and looked deeply at Yi Xian. Then, he laughed mockingly and said, Birth, old age, sickness, and death are predestined by the heavens and the fate of mortals. You want to revive the dead? That's just wishful thinking. I can't help you with this. Fate? Yi Xian sneered and said, I don't believe in fate. I believe that my fate is up to me and not the heavens. Looking at Yi Xian's cold face, Yuanling sighed and said, Yi Xian, listen to my advice. Everything in the mortal world is but an illusion. After 100 years, everything will turn to dust. Why are you so obsessed with the things in the mortal world? Yi Xian looked at Yuanling with a deep gaze and said, Everyone has their own obsession. You are no exception. Some people and things in the mortal world are my obsession. You disappoint me too much. I won't help you. Yuanling's voice was cold as he refused. Tell me, what will it take for you to help me? Yi Xian sneered and said. Yi Xian knew that Yuanling was setting up a big game. In this game, he was a very important part. Today, he returned to the Blood Sea battlefield and asked Yuanling to help him. This was probably part of Yuanling's plan. It's not that I don't want to help you, but you have to know that allowing a mortal to come back to life is a violation of the cycle of life and death. If the people of the earthly immortal dimension notice it, then both of us will suffer unprecedented danger. Yuanling spoke with a gloomy voice. Rumble. The blood sea surged and evil qi filled the air. Yi Xian's forehead shone and a 3-inch halberd emerged from his forehead. As the 3-inch halberd expanded in the bloody light, it became 1,000 feet long blood halberd and stood between the heavens and the earth. Countless dead souls wailed and the vast blood sea churned. When the heaven-destroying halberd appeared, an extremely violent mood filled the entire blood sea battlefield. Seeing this scene, Yuanling's aura suddenly became gloomy and he roared at Yi Xian, Yi Xian, do you want to attack me? Yuanling, you and I are the same. We will do anything to achieve our goals. I hope you won't force me. Yi Xian put his hands behind his back and looked coldly at Yuanling, as if he would attack at any moment. Clearly, Yi Xian was not just saying. If Yuanling did not help him, he would have to shed all pretense of cordiality and have a great battle with him. Looking at the evil aura around Yi Xian's body that soared into the sky, Yuanling's fists would occasionally clench and loosen. The black aura around his body fluctuated to the extreme. It was obvious that his mind was furious to the extreme, and he seemed to be weighing something. Phew! Yuanling exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Her tightly clenched fists finally loosened, and her gaze towards Yi Xian deepened once more. Yi Xian, do you still remember that when you first entered the Blood Sea battlefield, you were already a dead person? If I had not passed on the immortal scripture to you, how could you have achieved what you have today? Yuan Ling laughed self-deprecatingly. That's right. If it were not for you, there would not be Yi Xian today. But don't forget, you are just a weapon spirit and I am your master. Yi Xian smiled mysteriously. Yuan Ling's aura was cold. He was about to angrily rebuke him, but he swallowed his words back. Good. I was not wrong about you. Yuan Ling laughed coldly. Take back the heaven-destroying halberd. I will tell you how to come back from the dead. As for whether you can do it, it will all depend on your own ability. After a battle in his heart, Yuan Ling knew that now was not the time to fall out with Yi Xian. He could only compromise. This was also an act of helplessness. Buzz! The 1,000-feet-long blood halberd turned into a ray of blood light and merged into Yi Xian's forehead. The evil qi that filled the sky also disappeared at this moment and the world became quiet. The shocking battle dissipated into nothingness. The two of them sat cross-legged facing each other. Yuan Ling also slowly revealed a secret that Yi Xian did not know. The world Yi Xian was in was actually an abandoned land. It was also called the prison of heaven and earth by the people of the earth immortal realm. For thousands of years, any immortal who committed a crime would have their cultivation destroyed and thrown into the abandoned land. They would be forever trapped in the cycle of reincarnation and would never be able to return to the earth immortal realm. These immortals who had their cultivation destroyed, because of their unwillingness, wanted to cultivate the body of an immortal in the banished land and return to the earth immortal realm. This was why the world had the legend of immortal cultivators. However, 10,000 years ago, the ancient war started. Just the earth immortal realm alone was enough to destroy mountains and rivers. This also caused the people of the earth immortal realm to completely seal off the banished land. Since then, the world changed and spiritual energy did not exist in the world. However, the 6 paths of reincarnation, the cycle of heaven and earth. Although the banished land did not have spiritual energy and the immortal cultivators disappeared without a trace, after death, people had to be reincarnated. This was the rule of heaven and earth. Even immortals could not change it. Hell was born and was divided into 2 camps, east and west. The east was called hell and the west was called hell. They were in charge of the 6 paths of reincarnation and helped the souls of the dead to be reincarnated. However, in the banished land, the world changed and spiritual energy did not exist in the world. 10,000 years ago, hell was still under the control of the exiled immortals. They called themselves Hell and God of the underworld. They had countless ghost servants and death gods under their command. However, as time passed, there was no longer a supply of spiritual qi in the world. The so-called Yama gods and underworld gods all died of old age in the long river of history. The Yama hell was also empty. Only the 6 paths of reincarnation continued to operate, which was why there was not much chaos. After Yuan Ling finished his story, he looked deeply at Yi Xian and said, although there are no living creatures in hell, the rules of the 6 paths of reincarnation operate there. You are only in the tribulation stage. If you forcefully bring the souls of the dead back to the human world, you will definitely suffer an unimaginable disaster. Tell me, how do I enter hell? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and asked. Chapter 101. Yuan Ling growled, Yi Xian, are you crazy? The 6 paths of reincarnation are not child's play. Even a primordial unity golden immortal would not dare to touch it. Otherwise, his body and soul would be destroyed. I just want to know how to enter the hell of Yama. I don't want to hear your nonsense. Yi Xian's eyes were cold, and his voice was extremely gloomy. How could Yi Xian not know the dangers of the hell of Yama? However, when he recalled Mother Ye's heartbroken face, the so-called danger was not worth mentioning. He must bring Yi Ling, her soul, back to the human world. After all, Yi Xian would leave Mother Yi sooner or later to pursue the Tongtian Dao that he wanted. After he left, if Mother Yi did not have Yi Ling, to accompany her, would she die alone? Stupid. Do you know that even if you can enter the hell of Yama, when you disturb the 6 paths of reincarnation, the terrifying power of the laws will instantly destroy your body and soul? You don't even want your life for a mere mortal. Yuan Ling was completely enraged, and he loudly rebuked Yi Xian. You can't stop me. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Good, good, good. Yuan Ling was so irritable that he was going crazy. He sneered and said, since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. This is the method to open the hell of Yama. If anything happens to you, don't say that I won't save you. Yuan Ling directly shot a ray of blood light at Yi Xian, which was reflected in Yi Xian's sea of consciousness. A set of inexplicable and obscure method was also engraved in Yi Xian's mind. Thank you. Yi Xian stood up from the air. When he took a step forward, he returned to his original path. Looking at Yi Xian's gradually disappearing figure, Yuan Ling's aura became gloomy and terrifying. Finally, he roared loudly, Yi Xian, remember this. When your life is in danger, summon the heaven-punishing halberd. Perhaps it can save your life. Hearing Yuan Ling's reminder, Yi Xian's lips curled into a strange smile, and he disappeared from Yuan Ling's sight. Wang. As Yi Xian left, the endless sea of blood surged. A blood-red shadow appeared beside Yuan Ling, and said in a cold and gloomy voice, Are you crazy? You actually let him go to hell. Do you know how important he is to us? If anything happens to him, when will we be able to see the light of day again? In response to the blood-red shadow's reprimand, Yuan Ling's aura was cold and gloomy. He said, If I don't tell him, I'm afraid there will be a great battle between us. You and I can't bear the consequences. But you have to know that although the 6 Tao precepts in the abandoned land are incomplete, they are still evolved from the precepts of heaven and earth. Even if you and I were in our best condition, we wouldn't dare to say that we could resist it with all our might. If he dies under the 6 Tao precepts, then... The blood-red shadow was worried and even hesitated to speak. Don't worry, he won't die. After all, the heaven-punishing halberd is an ancient killing weapon. When he is in danger, it will definitely save his life. This time, he will go to hell to learn a lesson and let him know that there is always someone better than him. Yuan Ling laughed coldly. Obviously, everything was within his calculations. You are too arrogant. I see that this boy has already formed a great momentum, and he vaguely has an aura that is not inferior to yours and mine. How can you be so sure that everything is within your calculations? The blood-red shadow sneered. After all, he has only cultivated for 4 years. Even if he is extremely scheming and shrewd, how can he be compared to you and me? Don't worry, it won't be long before you and I reappear in the Earth Immortal world. Yuan Ling was extremely confident. The blood-red shadow shook his head and sighed before disappearing into the sea of blood again. Heaven and earth, primordial spirit void. The discussion between the two fell into Yi Xian's ears. This also made Yi Xian's expression calm. However, when he opened and closed his eyes, a trace of contempt flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian had a great secret. This secret was known to no one except himself. This was also his greatest trump card. It was also because of this secret that Yi Xian knew from the beginning that Yuan Ling was not the immortal scripture's vessel spirit at all. Instead, he was an existence whose primordial spirit had left his body. This secret was related to the immortal scripture. It was also the most important scripture of the immortal scripture. The immortal scripture had existed since the beginning of heaven and earth. Under the vast passage of time, although not many people had obtained this scripture, it was still not in the minority. However, the only person who could truly comprehend the immortal scripture was Yi Xian alone. Yi Xian could merge into the void and not be detected by Yuan Ling because of this secret. The immortal scripture, forbidden chapter. What was the forbidden chapter? It was not tolerated by heaven and earth. It did not appear in the eyes of living creatures. It went against time and space and disrupted the laws of heaven and earth. This was the forbidden chapter. If the immortal scripture was a supreme immortal cultivation technique, then the forbidden chapter was the strongest of the strongest. It had never truly revealed itself in the world. The primordial spirit void was one of the most basic techniques in the taboo chapter, and it was also something that Yi Xian had just grasped. As his cultivation deepened, the taboo chapter's taboo technique would gradually reveal its terror. Flowing light flashed and the void crisscrossed. Yi Xian truly disappeared from the Blood Sea battlefield. Yuan Ling and the blood-colored shadow did not know that their various schemes and arrangements were all seen by Yi Xian. What they did not know was that the immortal scripture actually hid the most important scripture, but it was obtained by Yi Xian. This was also the biggest variable. If the two of them knew about this, who knew how they would feel? The void crisscrossed, and the blood light was faintly discernible. Yi Xian's physical body tore through the endless void. When he reappeared, he was already standing in a mass grave. According to the description of the technique given by Yuan Ling, if one wanted to open the hell of Yama, one needed to find a place of extreme yin. Only then could one communicate with the gate of the hell of Yama. This mass grave was extremely dense with yin qi. It was also the most suitable place to open the hell of Yama. A cool breeze blew, causing Yi Xian's hair to flutter. He drew a circle with his palms. His body was surrounded by a misty blood-colored light. Streaks of blood-colored runes shot out from his palms. An inexplicable scripture was uttered from his mouth. Woo 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 woo. The yin qi was vast and mighty. An inexplicable fluctuation bloomed with Yi Xian as the center. This part of the world slowly darkened. A yin qi vortex gradually formed in the void. Buzz! The void trembled. The sky was gloomy. A yin qi vortex appeared in the void. The wails of dead souls could be heard from the vortex. At a glance, it was as if one's soul was about to be sucked in. The gate of the hell of Yama had already opened. Yi Xian's eyes were deep. Without any hesitation, he took a step forward and entered the yin qi portal. Buzz! As Yi Xian entered the hell of Yama, the yin qi portal quickly closed until it disappeared without a trace. It was as if it had never appeared in the world. Chapter 102. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. This was a boundlessly dark and vast space. There was no sky or earth. As far as the eye could see, there were only countless dazzling lights that stretched across the sky. Woo! A cold wind blew and a chill invaded his body. Even though Yi Xian was at the tribulation transcendence stage, he still felt a chill from the bottom of his heart. This kind of chill didn't come from his body, but from his soul. Rumble! A ray of light at dawn illuminated the endless void. A resplendent path of light lay beneath Yi Xian's feet. Behind him, strange and horrifying cries could be heard. When the nether soldiers pass through, the living shall retreat. The voice was emotionless, and it gave off a chill that came from the soul. It was as if the voice had always existed in the distant past, as if it was a will formed from the laws of the world. Ta ta ta! The sound of horse hooves could be heard as a sinister wind rumbled. Just as Yi Xian was slightly surprised, he saw a magnificent army of thousands of men and horses appear behind him. They were galloping along the resplendent path of light. Black spears, black iron warhorses, and a vast army of yin soldiers. These were the things that Yi Xian saw. Yi Xian's expression didn't change. His body slightly tilted to the side and directly made way for these strange things to pass by him on horseback. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, a hint of surprise flashing through his eyes. What did he see? Among the vast army of ghost soldiers, countless pale souls were bound by chains. Clearly, the cries and wails from before had come from these souls. The soul of a person after death? Yi Xian muttered to himself. As a cultivator in the tribulation stage, Yi Xian could feel that the vast army of Yin soldiers had no consciousness at all. It was as if they were machines that carried out orders and had been maintaining the operation of hell since ancient times. Moreover, what surprised Yi Xian the most was that the eyes of the Yin souls imprisoned in chains were extremely dull. Other than numb crying and wailing, there was no trace of human emotion at all. When a person's soul leaves their body after death, could it be that even their memories from when they were alive no longer exist? Yi Xian muttered in his sleep, a gloomy expression appearing in his eyes. If that was the case, even if he found Yi Ling, her soul, how could he recover her memories? While Yi Xian was pondering, the vast army of Yin soldiers sped past him. However, it was also at this moment that Yi Xian caught a glimpse of a headless ghost general passing by him. It paused for a moment before continuing to rush towards the depths of hell. Something strange. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and chased after the headless ghost general. He even leaped onto the headless ghost general's warhorse and followed the army of Yin soldiers. Heaven and earth inverted, return to the origin. Yi Xian pointed a finger at the headless ghost general. A spot of blood-red light appeared in the void. The headless ghost general's body suddenly shook and the yin qi around it suddenly exploded, drowning Yi Xian. The technique that Yi Xian used was a soul-searching technique. It could see all the memories of the target. When he realized that the headless ghost general seemed to be different from the other Yin soldiers, he was afraid that the headless ghost general might have developed some consciousness. How dare you! All of a sudden. Before Yi Xian could search the headless ghost general's memories, there was an explosion in the endless heaven and earth. A Yin thunder suddenly appeared above Yi Xian's head and violently struck down on him. Bang! The headless ghost general exploded into smoke and Yi Xian's body was suddenly sent flying. The terrifying Yin thunder and lightning continued to wreak havoc on his body, making him feel as if his soul was being torn apart. The law of heaven and earth? Yi Xian's eyes were cold and his voice was ruthless and low. He suddenly exploded with a majestic blood-red light and directly turned the Yin thunder into smoke. He looked at the void in all directions and his eyes were filled with hostility. Obviously, Yi Xian wanted to search the headless ghost general's memories and directly violated the law of heaven and earth's bottom line. It even formed a Yin thunder and stopped him. If the Yin thunder formed by the law of heaven and earth is so powerful, wouldn't the law of six paths be even more terrifying? Yi Xian's face was gloomy as he naturally thought of this matter. Fortunately, after the Yin thunder disappeared, there was no more movement in the heaven and earth. Yi Xian's eyes were deep and he did not take any drastic actions. He could only take one step at a time and follow behind the vast army of Yin soldiers. He wanted to see what kind of existence was in the depths of the hell of Yama. The Yin wind whistled and the horses' hooves thundered. In the hell of Yama, there seemed to be no concept of time. Yi Xian did not know how long he walked with the vast army of Yin soldiers. When Yi Xian's patience was almost worn out, a towering city appeared in front of his eyes. Fengdu City. Yi Xian said in surprise. There was a city gate mottled with blood and pitch-black walls. On top of the city gate hung a black plaque with the words, Fengdu City, written on it. However, this was not what surprised Yi Xian the most. What surprised him the most was that the city was extremely vast. In all directions of the void, there were countless Yin soldiers escorting dead souls into Fengdu City. Soon, Yi Xian followed the vast army of Yin soldiers to the city gate. There was a blood-red stone tablet on both sides of the city gate with 8 bloody words written on it. The dead rest in peace, the living stay away. These 8 words were written with iron and silver hooks, making people feel as if their souls were about to be sucked in at a glance. Even Yi Xian's tribulation passing stage primordial spirit felt a little dizzy. The power of heaven and earth really can't be underestimated. Yi Xian focused his mind and calmed his qi. He let out a sigh of admiration, but there was an extremely hot look in his eyes. Yi Xian was not afraid. He also believed that his future would not stop at the tribulation passing stage. When he reached the peak, even the laws of heaven and earth would be trampled under his feet. The dead souls entered the city and the Yin soldiers passed through. Yi Xian restrained his aura to the extreme and finally entered Fengdu City. Fengdu City. Ancient buildings, pavilions, and palaces rose from the ground. Yi Xian felt as if he had traveled through time and returned to ancient times. However, there were no living people in this city. Countless dead souls floated in the city. The gloomy ghost aura filled the void. The vast army of Yin soldiers had just entered the city when they strangely dissipated. There was only a path of Yin light that led to the depths of the city. It was unknown where the end of the path was. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and strolled along the path of Yin light into the city. From time to time, dead souls would step on the path of Yin light and pass by him. However, these dead souls were lifeless and did not have any human emotions at all. Time passed very quickly. As Yi Xian gradually walked towards the center of the city, the number of dead souls on the path gradually increased. In the center of the city, there were 6 doors that were constantly rotating, releasing an ancient aura as if they had stood there for countless years. 6 paths of reincarnation. Yi Xian's footsteps came to an abrupt halt, and his expression gradually became heavy. This was because he saw the dead souls on the path step into the 6 doors in a daze. Their bodies gradually turned into mist until they disappeared into the 6 doors. Obviously, this was the so-called reincarnation. At this moment, Yi Xian felt a great sense of urgency. He did not know if he had come too late. If Yi Ling, or soul, had already been reincarnated, then wouldn't his efforts have been in vain? Chapter 103. Just as Yi Xian was feeling vexed. Suddenly, a strange sound entered his ears, causing him to look towards the source of the sound. A dark soul, as black as ink, was lurking on both sides of the light path. As soon as a departed soul stepped onto the light path, the dark soul suddenly transformed into a ferocious bloody mouth and swallowed the departed soul. Then, it quickly fled into the distance, as if it was afraid of being discovered by some existence. Looking at this scene, Yi Xian was startled. Then, a trace of ecstasy appeared in his eyes. He directly left the light path and transformed into a bloody stream of light as he chased after the dark soul. The dark wind exploded and the void trembled. The dark soul seemed to feel that someone was chasing after him. This caused his aura to become chaotic and he desperately fled forward. Do you think you can escape? Suddenly, Yi Xian blocked in front of the dark soul. When he struck out with his palm, a surging bloody light erupted and directly slapped the dark soul to the ground. Living person. How can there be living people in hell? The dark soul was ghastly. When he raised his eyes and saw Yi Xian, he let out a cry of horror. As expected, you have your own consciousness. Yi Xian's eyes lit up. His originally anxious mood immediately eased. Tell me, who are you? Why are you different from other departed souls? Why do you have your own consciousness? Yi Xian strolled forward until he came to the dark soul's side. The bloody light in his eyes was so dense that it was almost tangible, causing the dark soul to tremble to the extreme. Exalted Immortal. My name is Dark Crow. Exalted Immortal, please spare my life. Looking at the terrifying bloody light around Yi Xian, the dark soul trembled and begged for mercy. Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. I just want to ask you a few questions. Yi Xian revealed a smile. The bloody light around him quickly retracted, causing the dark crow to gradually calm down. Exalted Immortal, this is not the place to talk. Let's find another place to talk. The dark crow sensed that Yi Xian had no intention of harming him. He hurriedly bowed to Yi Xian and looked around with fear. Then, he quickly led the way for Yi Xian. Soon after, under the dark crow's guidance, the two of them appeared in a remote pavilion in Necropolis. It wasn't until they entered the pavilion that the dark crow's panicked emotions calmed down. You're scared. What are you scared of? Although the dark crow didn't have a physical body, Yi Xian could sense his panic, which prompted him to ask. Exalted Immortal, you may not know this, but the laws of Yama are dense. Previously, when I swallowed the souls of the dead, I had to risk my life to succeed. If the laws of heaven and earth were to detect it, my soul would be scattered and I would die. The dark crow said with lingering fear. Yi Xian nodded after hearing the dark crow's explanation. Clearly, the dark crow was telling the truth. When he had probed the headless ghost general before, the laws of the world had punished him. Yi Xian softly asked, Tell me, why do you want to devour souls and what kind of existence are you? As Yi Xian asked, the dark crow slowly explained his origins and gave Yi Xian an introduction to the situation in Fengdu City. According to the dark crow, he didn't know who he was when he was alive. When he gained consciousness, he appeared in Necropolis. At first, he wandered aimlessly, but as the days passed, he was horrified to find that his body was constantly being pulled by the six paths as if it wanted to devour him. By chance, the dark crow found that devouring souls could stabilize his soul and even break free from the pull of the six paths of reincarnation. However, devouring souls was extremely dangerous and could cause his soul to scatter at any time. In order to survive, the dark crow would take risks every once in a while, resulting in the scene that Yi Xian saw earlier. From the dark crow's narration, Yi Xian also learned that the dark crow was not an exception. There were many existences like the dark crow hiding in Necropolis. However, the survival of these souls with consciousness was worrying. Every once in a while, they would be destroyed by the laws of heaven and earth. After understanding the situation, a light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes as if he was weighing something. He didn't say anything for a long time, causing the dark crow to become nervous. From time to time, he would steal glances at Yi Xian from the corner of his eyes. Have you seen this person before? Yi Xian pointed with his finger and Yi Ling's appearance appeared in the air. Upper Immortal, please don't blame me. I have never seen this person. Moreover, Necropolis is too big. Every day, there are so many souls entering here. If you really want to find her, I'm afraid. The dark crow hesitated. Hearing the dark crow's answer, Yi Xian's eyes were filled with disappointment. This also made the dark crow's mind move. He turned his eyes slightly and carefully probed, although I have never seen this person, I have a way to find her whereabouts. However, this method is extremely dangerous. I don't know if you... Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and looked indifferently at the dark crow. He said, What method? Upper Immortal, this hell of Yama was once under the control of immortals and gods. Although they died of old age, the Book of Life and Death in Yama Palace is intact. If you can obtain this item, it will be easy to find this person. Book of Life and Death. Yi Xian murmured to himself. He looked at the soul with a strange expression. Previously, the dark crow clearly said that he had no memory of his life. How did he know that in those distant years, hell of Yama was under the control of immortals and gods? Obviously, the dark crow was lying. Perhaps feeling that Yi Xian's gaze was not right, the dark crow held his breath and quickly explained, Upper Immortal, please don't blame me. This little one only saw some ancient books in Fengdu City that mentioned this. As for whether the Book of Life and Death exists or not, this little one doesn't know the details. It's fine. If you can help me, why would I doubt you? Yi Xian smiled gently. However, a ray of bloody light flashed in his eyes and then quietly disappeared. Looking at the smile on Yi Xian's face, the dark crow let out a sigh of relief. He struck while the iron was hot and urged, Upper Immortal, if you obtain the Book of Life and Death, perhaps you can control the sixth Tao of reincarnation. At that time, in this huge Fengdu city, you will be the supreme existence. Looking at the dark crow's eager expression, Yi Xian's smile became even more amiable. He affectionately patted the dark crow's shoulder and said, You are very good. If I can obtain the Book of Life and Death, I will certainly not mistreat you. This little one doesn't dare to take credit. As long as Upper Immortal can control the 6 Tao of reincarnation after obtaining the Book of Life and Death, this little one's life will not be in danger. This is already very satisfying. The dark crow knelt on the ground and continuously kowtowed to Yi Xian in gratitude. A wisp of a cold smile appeared on the corner of Yi Xian's mouth before disappearing without a trace. He even intimately helped the dark crow up and said, "Tell me, where is the Book of Life and Death, and how should I obtain it?" Legend has it that the Book of Life and Death is on the table in Yan Luo Dian. However, there is a grand ceiling formation in Yan Luo Dian. If you want to enter, you must break the seal. I wonder if Upper Immortal. The dark crow wanted to say something but hesitated. You lead the way. I also want to see what Yan Luo Dian looks like. The smile on Yi Xian's face remained the same from beginning to end. It could be said that both of them had their own ulterior motives. However, this layer of paper had not been pierced through yet. The dark crow's eyes lowered as a glint of darkness flashed in his eyes. When he lifted his head again, he became even more respectful towards Yi Xian. Upper Immortal, please follow me. Following the dark crow's lead, the two directly left the pavilion and headed towards the center of Fengdu City. Chapter 104. An Ancient Legend. The world was divided into 3 realms. The first was the celestial court, the second was the human world, and the third was the underworld. In the underworld, there were the 10 kings of hell, the ox head and horse face, the black and white impermanence, and the terrifying 18 levels of hell. Yi Xian did not know if the legend was true, but he knew that he had never seen the 10 kings of hell, the ox head and horse face, let alone the 18 levels of hell. At this moment, what appeared before Yi Xian's eyes was an extremely dilapidated black palace. The mottled walls were engraved with traces of the passage of time, and 2 malevolent ghosts were carved on the blood-colored copper door, giving off a sinister and terrifying feeling. A dark golden plaque hung above the door beam, and 3 words were written on it, King of Hell's Hall. Great Immortal, it is said that the Book of Life and Death is in the King of Hell's Hall. But if you want to enter, you have to break the seal. The dark crow reminded. Yi Xian did not answer. Instead, he strolled to the front of the King of Hell's Hall. When he opened and closed his eyes, a blood-red light flashed in his eyes. He raised his hand and slammed it on the door of the palace. Bang! The heaven and earth shook, and blood spurted out. An extremely terrifying scene appeared. Roar! It shook the heaven and earth, and the roar shattered the mountains and rivers. The 2 evil spirits carved on the door came to life at this moment. A monstrous ghost fog rose around them, and they violently pounced on Yi Xian. Slash! Yi Xian's face was expressionless. A pair of sword fingers pierced through the sky, and 100 feet long blood sword appeared. With an unparalleled power, it directly chopped down on the 2 evil spirits. At the same time, the dark crow, who was originally following behind Yi Xian, suddenly laughed wildly. Under Yi Xian's cold gaze, it turned into a soul shadow and instantly entered the King of Hell's Hall. Ha! Junior, thank you for blocking these 2 evil spirits for me. When I get the Book of Life and Death, I will definitely turn you into an evil spirit servant to repay you. Roar! When the dark crow broke into the Yama Palace, the 2 evil spirits let out ferocious roars. The ghostly fog around them grew thicker, and they pounced on Yi Xian without fear of death. Soul extinguishing finger. A speck of blood-red light appeared on Yi Xian's fingertip. As if it could pierce through the void of time, it instantly turned the 2 evil spirits into black smoke. It also caused the world to suddenly quiet down. A cruel sneer appeared on Yi Xian's lips. He strolled into the Yama Palace unhurriedly, as though the dark crow's actions had not angered him at all. From start to finish, Yi Xian didn't trust the dark crow at all. He already knew that the dark crow was only using him to enter the Yama temple. However, none of this mattered. To Yi Xian, the dark crow's life was already in his hands. The dark crow was still too inexperienced to scheme against him. After passing through the dark passageway, a ray of light rose in front of him. When Yi Xian walked out of the passageway, he saw a majestic and luxurious palace. The 99 black jade stairs gave off a mysterious glow. At the end of the stairs, a black wooden table appeared. The dark crow was holding a black jade book and laughing maniacally. Ha, it's been 3,000 years, a full 3,000 years. I didn't expect the Book of Life and Death to return to my hands again. The dark crow roared excitedly. The dark light around him continued to surge, causing the entire Yama palace to shake violently as if it would collapse at any time. Suddenly, the dark crow stopped laughing and turned to look at Yi Xian. The yin qi around him changed strangely and he actually turned into a human. He had sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, fair skin, and a head of black hair. The dark crow was wearing a flood dragon robe and a skull crown. His face was dignified. He held the Book of Life and Death and looked down at Yi Xian who was below the black jade stairs. There was a look of scrutiny in his eyes. Should I call you the dark crow or Yama? Yi Xian said calmly with his hands behind his back. Junior, although I don't know how you entered the Yama hell, I can spare your life today since you helped me retrieve the Book of Life and Death. However, from now on, you are my servant and you will do as I command, the dark crow said majestically. Ha! Yi Xian laughed. He really laughed, but it was a contemptuous laugh. The dark crow narrowed his eyes and his face gradually darkened. Junior, what are you laughing at? The dark crow said coldly. Tap, tap, tap. Like the beating of war drums and the wailing of thousands of blood spirits, Yi Xian's body bloomed with a Tongtian blood-red light as he strolled toward the dark crow. There were 99 steps of the black jade stairs. With each step Yi Xian took, thousands of blood shadows roared around Yi Xian. The thick bloody evil aura filled the entire Yama palace and made Yi Xian look terrifying. Looking at this scene, the dark crow's expression changed greatly. He unconsciously retreated and quickly activated the Book of Life and Death. A turbid light beam shrouded him and blocked the terrifying power that Yi Xian released. Dong! Yi Xian finally walked in front of the dark crow. When he opened and closed his eyes, he looked at the dark crow with an indifferent and emotionless expression, as if he was looking at an ant. Tribulation stage. How is this possible? The dark crow's eyes followed closely and his voice trembled slightly. He finally discovered a terrifying fact. The power that the young man in front of him displayed already had a trace of immortal spirit. This was a sign that he was about to become an immortal. No, impossible, there is no spiritual energy in the world. How did you reach the tribulation passing stage? The dark crow roared in horror. If it wasn't for the Book of Life and Death, he would have fled in panic. I will give you two choices. You can either submit to me or perish. Yi Xian said casually with his hands behind his back. Ha! Looking at Yi Xian's fearless appearance, the dark crow woke up from his shock and laughed coldly. Junior, have you heard that if the King of Hell wants you dead at midnight, who dares to keep you alive until dawn? If not for the Book of Life and Death, I would not be your opponent. But now that I have the Book of Life and Death, killing you is as easy as crushing an ant. Oh. You can try. Yi Xian smiled faintly. There was an indescribable strangeness in his eyes. You are courting death. The dark crow roared. The Book of Life and Death left his hand and turned into a stone book that was hundreds of feet tall. It emitted endless dark light and pressed down on Yi Xian. Junior, the Book of Life and Death is a spiritual object formed by the laws of heaven and earth. Even if you are at the tribulation stage, you will definitely die under the Book of Life and Death. The dark crow laughed maniacally, but before he could finish laughing, what happened next caused him to be completely dumbfounded. His body began to tremble uncontrollably. Boom! Standing upright, the blood light of the Tongtian stood. In the endless void, the souls of the dead were crying and the evil spirits were howling miserably. Streaks of blood light burst out from Yi Xian's body. When he punched out, the fist radiance of the Tongtian's fist surged out violently and directly blew away the Book of Life and Death. Chapter 105. Buzz. The void exploded, and the heavens and the earth shook. Without waiting for the dark crow to react, Yi Xian took a step forward and waved his hand. The 300-meter-long Book of Life and Death instantly transformed into a black jade book and was sucked into Yi Xian's hand. It was cold to the touch and his soul was throbbing. This was what Yi Xian felt at the moment. When the blood light evaporated from Yi Xian's hand, the Life and Death book that had been in a riot gradually calmed down and turned into an ordinary stone book without any energy fluctuation. How is this possible? The dark crow roared in horror. He was completely confused and could not believe what he had seen. Dong! Yi Xian took a step forward, causing the ground to explode. Holding the Book of Life and Death in his hands, he instantly appeared in front of the dark crow. When he struck out with his palm, he directly slapped the dark crow to the ground, and his wide foot suddenly stomped on the dark crow's face. Why? Why? The Life and Death book is obviously formed by heaven and earth and contains incredible power. Why is it like this? The dark crow roared crazily as he was stepped on by Yi Xian. Obviously, he could not accept this fact. You are really ignorant. Yi Xian sneered and stroked the Life and Death book in his hand. A hint of excitement appeared in his eyes and then disappeared quietly. You are just a soul and your cultivation is extremely weak. How can the Life and Death book display its power in your hands? Yi Xian said bluntly. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the dark crow instantly realized that he had made a very serious mistake. He was just a soul now and had lost his cultivation. He was like a child. Even if he had a sharp steel knife in his hand, how could he fight against an adult? Unfortunately, it was too late for the dark crow to understand this. His life had already fallen into Yi Xian's hands and he might die in the next moment. What do you want? The dark crow said in a trembling voice. You only have two choices in front of me. You can either submit to me or die with your body and soul destroyed, Yi Xian said coldly. Impossible. The dark crow didn't even think about it and angrily refused. Although the dark crow was a soul and lacked most of his memories, he knew who he was when he was alive. In the distant past, he was known as the King Yenluo of Hell, and he was the ruler of the eastern underworld. How could he possibly submit to a junior of the future? Even though Yi Xian had stepped on him, the dark crow had his own pride and refused to bow down to Yi Xian. He roared, Junior, even if you are in the crossing calamity stage, I am the King of Hell of the East. Don't even think about making me submit to you. King Yenluo. Yi Xian sneered, his eyes full of contempt. A person's greatest sin is ignorance. Not to mention that you're just a mere soul now, even if you were alive, you were just a dejected immortal. As Yi Xian spoke to hear, his voice paused for a moment. His gaze towards the dark crow became even more strange as he said, Do you know the true meaning of the words King Yama? I. The dark crow said in a trembling voice, but it swallowed the words that were about to come out of its mouth. Its entire body became silent. How could the dark crow not understand the meaning of the words Yama King? Yama King was one of the kings of hell. It was said that in the earthly immortal realm, Yama King controlled the 6 paths of reincarnation and was revered by all living things. As for the world Yi Xian was in, it was just an abandoned land. The laws of heaven and earth were incomplete, and there was basically no trace of spiritual energy. Even the Yama hell that he was in right now was only constructed by the laws of the heavens for the reincarnation of the dead. A mere soul dared to use the name of Yama King. How could Yi Xian not find it ridiculous? Seeing the dark crow speechless, Yi Xian slowly shook his head and said with a cruel smile, I have given you a chance, but you don't know how to cherish it. Don't blame me. A terrifying bloody light bloomed in Yi Xian's palm. It seemed that Yi Xian would kill the dark crow in the next moment. Don't kill me. I can recognize you as my master, but you have to promise me one thing. When death approached, the dark crow finally felt fear. He really didn't want to die. After all, he had struggled at death's door for so many years in hopes of leaving this damned place. How could he be willing to die in the hands of Yi Xian? Condition? Yi Xian sneered, even your life is mine. Do you think you are qualified to negotiate with me? Now tell me how to find the person I want to find through the Book of Life and Death. And you said before that if I get the Book of Life and Death, I can control the 6 paths of reincarnation and control the entire Yama hell. Is this true? Yi Xian asked in a low voice. He moved his foot away from the dark crow's face, allowing him to quickly stand up. However, the yin energy around him fluctuated slightly. It was clear that he found it difficult to accept the fact that he had become Yi Xian's servant. The Book of Life and Death is formed from a worldly spirit. It records the existence of every soul in Fengdu. As long as you merge your divine sense into the book, you will naturally be able to find the other person's location. The dark crow bowed and continued, as for being able to control the Yama hell after obtaining the Book of Life and Death, this is only a lie. The life and death of all things are determined by the heavens. The 6 paths of reincarnation are also in charge of the reincarnation of souls. Outside of the true Yama king of the earth immortal world, no one has ever heard of this. After hearing the dark crow's explanation, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and kept on stroking the Book of Life and Death in his hand. A thoughtful glint flashed through his eyes as he sank into contemplation. Ever since Yi Xian entered the Yama hell and saw the boundless souls of the dead, an extremely bold idea arose in his mind. After the death of mortals, their souls would enter this place. If he could control the Yama hell, it would be of great benefit to him. However, after listening to the dark crow's explanation, it seemed that this was simply a delusion. Is it really impossible? Yi Xian muttered to himself. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the dark crow's expression changed. He did not expect Yi Xian to be so ambitious that he actually wanted to control the Yama hell. A mocking look appeared in the dark crow's eyes. This is simply a fantasy. Since the birth of the Yama hell, the 6 paths of reincarnation have always been operating. Although this 6 paths of reincarnation cannot be compared with the 6 paths of reincarnation in the earth immortal world, it is also filled with the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. Even if you are a true immortal, you cannot resist the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. The dark crow spoke respectfully, but his words contained a hint of mockery. Obviously, he sneered at Yi Xian's ambition. A fantasy story? How do you know it won't work if you don't try? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. A hint of madness flashed through his eyes and a strange smile appeared on his face. When the dark crow saw the smile on Yi Xian's face, he could not help but shudder. He unconsciously stepped back as if there was a voice in the unseen world telling him that the person in front of him would bring about an extremely terrible change to the Yama hell. You must not act recklessly. The 6 paths of reincarnation are not something that can be controlled by human strength. The dark crow said in horror. His illusory body trembled unconsciously. Obviously, he was frightened by Yi Xian's words. Chapter 106. Others might not know how terrifying the 6th Tao of reincarnation was, but how could the dark crow not know? The 6th Tao of law, destruction of life. This was not just a saying. If the terrifying power contained within were to erupt, the entire Yama hell would collapse. At that time, not only would Yi Xian die, but he would also be implicated. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not take the dark crow's advice to heart. Since he had such an idea, he naturally had a certain level of confidence. Buzz! Yi Xian's divine sense entered the Book of Life and Death. He saw the Book of Life and Death flip rapidly. Information poured into Yi Xian's sea of consciousness like a tide. The scene of the entire Fengdu city was reflected in his mind. Found it. After dozens of breaths, Yi Xian opened his eyes. A trace of joy appeared on his face. He held the Book of Life and Death and directly walked out of the Yama Palace. He also let the dark crow quickly follow. East Gate of Fengdu City. Yi Ling, her soul shadow was illusory. She hugged her knees and leaned against a corner of the wall. Her eyes were dull and lifeless as she stared blankly at the ground below her feet, giving off a delicate and pitiful feeling. Buzz. When Yi Xian appeared in front of Yi Ling, he did not attract any attention from her. Yi Xian saw his little sister's appearance and frowned slightly. Dark Crow, how do I recover her memories? Yi Xian asked in a low voice. The Book of Life and Death is a spiritual item of heaven and earth. Not only can it exterminate souls, but it can also recover their memories. As long as you activate this item, you can wake her up, the Dark Crow respectfully said. Hearing the Dark Crow's reminder, Yi Xian slowly nodded. The vast blood energy in his body poured into the Book of Life and Death, causing the book's light to blaze. It instantly enveloped Yi Ling, causing her dull face to distort as if she was experiencing some kind of pain. Ah! Suddenly, Yi Ling, let out a scream. Her dull eyes gradually regained their spirit. Extreme fear appeared in her eyes. Little sister, don't be afraid, Yi Xian said softly. Brother. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian in front of her, she was completely stunned. Then, her face showed an expression of disbelief. She clearly remembered that at the airport in Jingdu, she was killed by a laser weapon that pierced through her heart. After that, she completely lost consciousness. Could it be that she was still alive? Didn't I die? Where is this place? Yi Ling's face was perplexed. When she saw the scene of Fengdu City, she became even more perplexed. According to common sense, you are indeed dead. This is the underworld, a place where people go after death. Yi Xian sighed and helped his little sister up from the ground. Since I'm already dead, brother, why are you here? Could it be? Looking at the wandering souls in Fengdu City and Yi Xian in front of him, Yi Ling's voice was choked with sobs. His face was filled with misery. He believed that Yi Xian was like him and had also become a soul. Alright, don't be silly. Your brother is not dead yet. This time, I came to the underworld to bring you back to the human world, Yi Xian said with a smile. Brother, is this true? Looking at the smile on Yi Xian's face, Yi Ling bit her lips tightly. She looked at Yi Xian with an extremely complicated expression. Yi Ling knew that her brother was very mysterious and had power that ordinary people could not reach. However, she had never thought that Yi Xian would have the ability to bring her back to life. If she had not seen Yi Xian with her own eyes, she would not have believed such a fantasy. Alright, little sister. You are now just a soul. Temporarily enter the Book of Life and Death. I will bring you back to the human world. Without waiting for Yi Ling to react, Yi Xian directly activated the Book of Life and Death and sucked his little sister's soul into it. When the Dark Crow saw this scene, his expression changed greatly. He immediately blocked in front of Yi Xian. Master, you cannot bring her out of the underworld, the Dark Crow said with a trembling voice. Yi Xian frowned and said, why? The cycle of life and death is determined by the heavens. This cannot be changed at all. If Master reverses yin and yang and brings the dead soul back to the human world, the 6 paths of reincarnation will definitely mercilessly suppress you, the Dark Crow explained anxiously. Hearing the Dark Crow's words, Yi Xian was stunned. He did not think that he was lying. After all, before he came to the underworld, Yuan Ling had told him about this. But I must bring her back to the human world. Yi Xian was silent for a long time. His eyes looked deeply at the dark crow. No, this is absolutely not possible. Unless Master does not even care about your own life. The dark crow roared in shock. He unconsciously stepped back because he found that an extremely terrifying bloody light had risen around Yi Xian's body. It was as if he was about to do something bad. Then I want to see how powerful the 6 paths of reincarnation is and whether or not it can stop me. Yi Xian's bloody light was chaotic. When he opened and closed his eyes, bloody lightning constantly flashed in his eyes. The surrounding void rumbled and exploded. Open for me. His roar shattered mountains and rivers. Heaven and earth shook. As Yi Xian punched out, a crack was directly blasted open in the endless void. A door to the human world also appeared in the void. Madman, you madman. Since you want to die, don't drag me down with you. Looking at this scene, the dark crow screamed in horror. He directly turned into a dark light and fled in panic. The trembling aura around the dark crow was proof of the extent of his fear. Suddenly, a terrifying thing happened, whoosh, like a sea of blood and the yellow river, the wailing of billions of dead souls reverberated in the underworld. The 6 paths of reincarnation rose in the center of Fengdu City. The dim and turbid light seemed to illuminate the universe. The rotation of heaven and earth, the 6 paths of reincarnation is boundless. The vast and merciless heavenly Tao thundered. This voice seemed to cross the barrier of time and space and appeared in the underworld. Rumble. The 6 paths of reincarnation crossed the void. The vast and invincible power directly crushed the gate of the human world opened by Yi Xian into ashes. The slowly rotating power of the Dharma seemed to crush the universe. Those who disturb yin and yang shall be killed. The heavenly Tao was merciless and the Dharma was strangling. The 6 paths of reincarnation rotated endlessly. Chains of order extended from the 6 paths of reincarnation and entangled Yi Xian with boundless and terrifying power. Yi Xian had never seen such a terrifying power. Even though he was in the crossing calamity stage, a great fear of life and death rose from the bottom of his heart. This feeling made Yi Xian's expression turn solemn. Extreme madness appeared in his eyes. How long has it been? 1 year or 2 years? When Yi Xian stepped into the crossing calamity stage, he no longer felt the invasion of death. The 4 years of life in the blood sea made him struggle in the face of death. He had not experienced this feeling for a long time. When this feeling appeared in his heart again, it made Yi Xian's blood boil completely. Monstrous fighting spirit appeared in his eyes. Undying celestial dipper. The sky exploded and the stars were shattered. Yi Xian sublimated to the extreme. His crossing calamity stage cultivation was fully revealed. The blood light of the Tongtian illuminated the entire Fengdu city. He also violently punched the 6 paths of reincarnation. Chapter 107. Bang! 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 The fist radiance was like a star, and the blood radiance was like a river of stars. Yi Xian's fists danced around the universe, and the chains of order collapsed under his fists. However, the 6 paths gate stood firm in the void, and a large number of chains of 6 paths shot out as if there was no end to them, wrapping around Yi Xian. The ground caved in for thousands of miles, and the void cracked. Fengdu City was in ruins. Yi Xian didn't know how many punches he had thrown, but the 6 paths gate in front of him didn't decrease in number, and his blood and qi were rapidly depleting. Bang! Suddenly, a chain of order shattered Yi Xian's protective blood radiance. The terrifying power of the law of 6 paths directly invaded his body, causing him to lose his balance and stagger backward. Thousands of miles away, the dark crow's face was filled with horror, and his eyes were filled with resentment. This idiot, does he really think he can fight against the law of 6 paths? High in the sky, in the void. Yi Xian's face was pale. A large number of chains of 6 paths had already wrapped around him, and terrifying blood scars appeared all over his body. From Yi Xian's hideous and terrifying face, one could tell how much pain he was in at this moment. Rumble. Suddenly, Yi Xian sat cross-legged, and his hideous and terrifying face gradually calmed down. When he opened his eyes, the blood-red lightning had already disappeared, and was replaced by a strange black lightning that a cool breeze blew, causing Yi Xian's gray hair to flutter in the wind. The blood radiance around him gradually disappeared, and a pitch-black and strange radiance slowly rose around him. God illuminates the sun and moon, demons create chaos, great demon fist creates chaos in heaven and earth, who in this world dares to claim supremacy, obscure and indescribable. The heavens were in turmoil. Yi Xian was slowly reciting sutras, and the sound of the 1,000 demons chanting came from the endless void. This chanting sound was strange and inexplicable, as if it had crossed the barrier of time and space to come to this world. It made people's souls tremble when they heard it. I have a fist, called the Great Demon. Rumble. Monstrous demonic light pierced through the past and present. When Yi Xian opened his eyes, his body began to tremble. The 6 chains wrapped around him gradually began to break apart. Bang! The 6 chains shattered in all directions. Yi Xian finally stood up. His entire body was shrouded in a pitch-black demonic light, making it impossible to see his expression. He slowly raised his right fist, and the fist aura that seemed to have transcended the ages was blooming with unprecedented power. Great Devil Fist. It was as if the stars had exploded, as if the heavens and earth were collapsing. When Yi Xian punched out, the endless void turned into dust and smoke, and the heaven-shaking demonic fist violently smashed towards the 6 doors. Bang bang bang. In the face of Yi Xian's punch, the door of 6 paths cracked and swayed violently in the void, as if it would collapse at any moment. Puff! A mouthful of blood spurted out from Yi Xian's mouth. The demonic light around him was extremely weak, and his face was extremely pale. This was because the Great Devil Fist was a supreme fist technique from the forbidden chapter of the Immortal scripture. It was extremely difficult for him to perform it with his cultivation at the crossing calamity stage. At this moment, his body was already injured because of performing this fist technique. Rumble. The door of 6 paths cracked, but it eventually stabilized and did not disappear in the void. Instead, an extremely violent emotion bloomed from the door of 6 paths buzz. The door of 6 paths rotated continuously. At this moment, an extremely terrifying change was taking place. After a dozen breaths, the door of 6 paths merged together, forming a terrifying door of 6 paths, heaven-defying, die. The heavenly Tao was emotionless, and its voice was like the netherworld. Before Yi Xian could react, an extremely terrifying pulling force suddenly exerted on his body and directly swallowed him into the door of 6 paths pain, excruciating pain, a pain worse than death. This was what Yi Xian was feeling at this moment. This pain was not only exerted on Yi Xian's body, but also directly reflected on his soul. Yi Xian's consciousness was blurring, and his primordial spirit was weakening. It was as if his body and soul would be destroyed at any time. The terrifying 6 paths of Dharma constantly destroyed Yi Xian's body, causing his body to be covered in blood, and a large amount of death qi permeated around him. Yi Xian's consciousness was blurred, but he struggled to hold on. Yi Xian bit the tip of his tongue and forced himself to stay alert. He kept telling himself that he could not die yet, and that he still had many things to do. He had not ascended to the 9 heavens, and he had not overlooked all living beings. How could he die under the 6 paths of Dharma? I, Yi Xian, was born as a human, and I have to swim against the current. Even if the heavens and earth punish me, I will pierce through the heavens and crush the earth. Yi Xian roared ferociously in the door of 6 paths. His mournful and unwilling voice seemed to be able to shake the heavens and earth. Heaven-destroying halberd. When Yi Xian roared out, the center of his brows glowed. The heavenly punishing halberd shot out and transformed into a 3,000-meter-long blood halberd that enveloped his body, protecting his last bit of life force. He even wanted to bring him out of the 6 heavenly gates. You can't leave. Before the heaven-destroying halberd could bring Yi Xian away, Yi Xian roared, and his eyes were filled with madness. Today, I am already powerless against the incomplete 6 paths of Dharma. If I face the immortals in the future, where can I escape to? As a furnace, I can bury the heavens and earth. Devour. Yi Xian had gone completely crazy. He sat cross-legged in the middle of the 6 paths of heaven gate with the heavenly punishing halberd as his protector. His entire body emitted an aura that could break the heavens and destroy the earth. He even opened his mouth wide and swallowed all of the power of laws within the 6 paths of heaven gate into his body. Poof! 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 Yi Xian's crazy actions caused his body to explode. The 6 paths of Dharma power wreaked havoc in his body, causing him to be bathed in blood. It was a tragic sight. Devour the heavens and earth. Refine my demonic body. Yi Xian seemed to have forgotten the pain in his body. He roared furiously and formed a terrifying demonic seal with his palms. He forcibly refined the 6 paths of Dharma power in his body. Ruthless. Ruthless. Extremely ruthless. Some people had always thought that Yi Xian was ruthless to his enemies. However, they did not know that Yi Xian was truly ruthless to himself. It was not a big deal for a person to be ruthless to his enemies. However, being ruthless to himself was the most terrifying thing. There was no doubt that Yi Xian was this kind of person. It was also because Yi Xian was ruthless to himself that he was able to survive in the Blood Sea battlefield in just 4 years and reach the crossing calamity stage. Today, Yi Xian finally revealed his true nature. He would never allow himself to be a failure. Not only did he want to devour the 6 paths of Dharma power, he also wanted to use the 6 paths of Dharma power to improve his supreme cultivation. Refining. Refining the 6 paths of Dharma power in his body in a frenzy. Yi Xian's body went from being destroyed to being repaired and then back to being destroyed again. He did not know how much time had passed as the cycle continued. Perhaps it was a day, perhaps it was a year. When the 6 paths of Dharma power in Yi Xian's body quieted down, a light of enlightenment flashed across Yi Xian's mind. His body emitted a faint yellow light at this moment. Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. Did I succeed? Yi Xian murmured to himself. He stared blankly at his palms. When his 5 fingers closed together, the extremely terrifying 6 paths of Dharma power crackled in his palms. The vast blood qi in his body surged like the sea, causing Yi Xian to be unable to recover for a long time. Success. I really did succeed. Not only did I refine the 6 paths of Dharma power, but my cultivation has also advanced from the early crossing calamity stage to the mid-crossing calamity stage. Yi Xian took a deep breath. His body trembled unconsciously, proving the extent of his excitement. High in the sky, in the void. Yi Xian sat cross-legged, constantly adjusting his surging emotions. Below him, more than half of Fengdu city had been annihilated. This proved how terrifying the calamity Yi Xian had experienced before was. I was resurrected from death. I rose from the ashes. No matter how many calamities there are in front of me, they will not stop me, Yi Xian. Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. His voice was calm and firm. The surging emotions in his heart also calmed down at this moment. Chapter 108. The world was silent and there was no sound at all. Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the air with a calm expression. He looked down at the entire Fengdu city from the sky, and the 6 rays of light that bloomed around his body caused the countless souls to tremble. Moss. Master. The dark crow flew over from the distant horizon. He immediately knelt down and kowtowed towards Yi Xian with deep reverence in his eyes. The Dark Crow was a very prideful person. However, his so-called pride had disappeared in front of Yi Xian because he was completely convinced by Yi Xian's methods. What he saw today made the Dark Crow understand one thing. Perhaps becoming Yi Xian's servant was not a bad thing. Following this person might be the best choice in his life. Looking at the Dark Crow's respectful expression, Yi Xian's eyes deepened and said, "Get up, I have something to tell you." "Yes, master." The Dark Crow got up and bowed to the side to listen to Yi Xian's instructions. "This time, I have grasped the laws of six and have comprehended the Tao of life and death. I also plan to rebuild the Eastern Underworld. Are you willing to cut through all obstacles for me to achieve my wish?" Yi Xian said with dignity. "This subordinate is willing." The Dark Crow bowed. "Good, I will bestow you with a strand of the laws of six. This will also ensure your safety in the Eastern Underworld." Yi Xian flicked his finger and a strand of the laws of six entered the Dark Crow's forehead. The Dark Crow was overjoyed and kept kowtowing to Yi Xian to express his gratitude. "I will lend you the Book of Life and Death. You will help me gather 1,000,000 soldiers and 100,000 ghost generals to rebuild the Eastern Underworld." The Dark Crow was surprised to see Yi Xian giving him the Life and Death book. He didn't expect for Yi Xian to trust him so much. Not only did Yi Xian give him a strand of the six Tao laws, but he also gave him the book for safekeeping. It was also because of Yi Xian's selfless trust that the Dark Crow was extremely moved. He bowed to Yi Xian and said resolutely, "Don't worry, master. With the six Tao laws and the Book of Life and Death in my hands, I will select vengeful ghosts and vengeful spirits from the billions of dead souls to be my soldiers. I will definitely create an army of hell for master. Today, I promise that when I become an immortal in the future, I will reforge your body and help you step onto the great Tao of the immortal God." Yi Xian understood a principle very well. Although killing could instill fear in others, the only way for a superior to control others was to use a combination of kindness and punishment. The Dark Crow thanks Master for his great kindness. From now on, wherever Master points his blade, the Dark Crow will advance courageously and will never betray him. After receiving Yi Xian's promise, the Dark Crow was extremely moved and was completely subdued by Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyes were deep and a smile appeared on his face. He was very satisfied with this result. Perhaps some people would ask, Yi Xian gave the Dark Crow a strand of the six Tao laws and even gave him the Book of Life and Death for safekeeping. Was he not afraid of the Dark Crow betraying him? Betrayal? Of course, Yi Xian thought of it. In fact, the Dark Crow didn't know that the six Tao laws given by Yi Xian seemed to be a reward for him, but it actually contained a bit of Yi Xian's divine sense. As long as the Dark Crow had any thoughts of betrayal, even if they were thousands of miles apart, Yi Xian could destroy his soul with just a thought. Trust? It didn't exist, not in this lifetime. Ever since Yi Xian stepped on the path of immortal cultivation, he had never trusted anyone. He only trusted himself. He seemed to trust the Dark Crow, but it was just a method to control people. The void trembled and the six Tao laws hummed. The laws of heaven and earth gradually evolved a new six Tao gate, allowing the souls of the dead to be reincarnated. This was the cycle of heaven and no one could change it. However, this new six Tao gate was no longer hostile to Yi Xian. After all, after refining the six Tao laws, he had the power of the six Tao laws in his body. The new six Tao gate naturally wouldn't suppress him. This is a jade slip for communication. If there's anything you can't solve, you can tell me. Yi Xian gave a jade slip to the Dark Crow, who received it respectfully. Rumble. The gate to the human world opened. Yi Xian took out a jade bottle and directly sucked Yi Ling, her soul, out of the Book of Life and Death. When he stepped out, he also entered the gate to the human world. The Dark Crow respectfully sends the Yama King back to the human world. The Dark Crow held the Book of Life and Death and bowed to Yi Xian's back. In the gate to the human world, Yi Xian heard the Dark Crow respectfully sending him off. The corner of his mouth curved into a strange smile as he murmured, Yama King? Yes, I like this name very much. It had been half a year since Yi Xian left for the underworld. It was already midsummer, and the scorching sun in the sky was roasting the earth. The surging heat waves made people feel even more anxious and unbearable. Half a year's time was neither too long nor too short. It was just that in this half a year, the world had already undergone extremely terrifying changes. There was a tsunami in Japan. A terrifying giant beast came ashore and devoured countless Japanese, causing tens of thousands of deaths. In a small country like Korea, there was a strange existence that ate people's souls and sucked their blood essence, causing extreme panic among the Koreans. In the Western countries, the legendary vampires were suspected to have appeared. There were even terrifying blood souls that wreaked havoc in the cities and devoured a large number of Western citizens, causing a bloody turmoil that had never been seen before. When these supernatural phenomena appeared all over the world initially kept it a secret. However, as these incidents appeared in large numbers, how could they hide from the eyes of the world? All the major forums on the internet, small news, and newspapers reported these terrifying incidents. An extremely panicked mood spread all over the world. When these supernatural phenomena appeared, people suddenly realized that the former order of the world had collapsed. Ancient martial art ability users that they had never seen before appeared one after another in front of them, fighting these terrifying beasts and strange blood souls. Facing these blood soul beasts that had escaped from the Blood Sea battlefield, how could the so-called ancient martial art ability users be a match for them? Crushing defeat, death, crying, and wailing. This was the fate of the ancient martial art ability users. The global summit was held at the United Nations. This meeting lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The world did not know what the meeting was about, but when the leaders of the various countries returned to their countries, shocking news spread. Martial arts academies, special ability academies, Taoist temples, and Buddhist monasteries sprang up one after another in the eyes of the world. When these forces displayed their supernatural powers in front of the world was even more horrified to discover that the world they existed in was not as simple as they had imagined. The original worldview completely collapsed. The world finally realized that perhaps humanity was about to face an unprecedented calamity. From primary school to university, martial arts and special ability courses were set up. Taoism and Buddhism were added into the curriculum. From the basic theory of martial arts to the cultivation methods, they had already appeared in the academies. The military departments of various countries were also wantonly recruiting soldiers. Finally, the various countries in the world jointly released a piece of news. The world had changed. There were unknown creatures devouring humans. If humans did not want to be wiped out, they had to be armed and engage in a life-and-death battle with these strange creatures. When the various countries in the world finally used these things to resist these blood soul beasts, people finally realized that this was no longer the world of the past. Unfortunately, even though the technological weapons were extremely terrifying and could barely resist some blood soul beasts, the human casualties did not decrease. In the cities and towns, weapons of mass destruction could not be used at all. Not to mention whether the technological weapons could destroy these beasts. When these technological weapons erupted with terrifying power, before the blood soul beasts died, the humans would die first. Chapter 109. Xia Country. One of the strongest countries in the world was also facing an unprecedented calamity. Be it the Martial Security Bureau or the military, they were all mobilized in this calamity. Ancient martial arts clans that were hidden all over the world appeared one after another. Even the secluded Taoist and Buddhist sects appeared in the eyes of the world. Jixia College, Martial Arts Heavenly Province, Lesser Thunder Temple, Monster Exterminating League, some of these supernatural forces were established by the country, while others were established by private individuals. However, without exception, all of them were recruiting. However, in the face of the invasion of the blood soul mutated beasts, these supernatural forces were defeated again and again. The occasional victory was just a drop in the bucket. The world fell into a bloody massacre. The former tourist attractions, the so-called famous mountains and lakes, were all sealed off by the various countries because of the existence of mutated beasts. If humans stepped into those places, the only outcome was death. When humans were defeated again and again and the blood-soul mutated beasts were rampant, a piece of exciting news came. In the West, Vatican City, a paladin walked out. With a golden holy spear, he killed countless blood-soul mutated beasts. He followed the will of God and walked the world. The people of the West cheered and the Vatican City became the highest holy land in the West. At the same time, in the East, Japan, a martial arts wanderer with a demon blade appeared. He killed countless blood-soul mutated beasts and bought Japan some time to breathe. In Korea, a martial arts saintess appeared. She traveled all over Korea and saved the lives of her people. She became famous and was revered as the saintess of the Korea protector. Xia country. 100 years ago, the second strongest in the world, Yiling Tian, walked out of the mountains. With a heavenly sword, he split mountains and rivers and destroyed countless blood-soul mutated beasts. He was revered as the protector sword god by the people of Xia country. This was not the end. 100 years ago, Xiantian martial artists appeared one after another. One of them was called Ba Dao. He was the fifth strongest in the world 100 years ago. His blood river saber was incomparably domineering. He was revered as the heavenly saber god. Taoist, Su Changsheng, used supreme Tao to save the people of Xia country from suffering. Buddhist, Mahakassapa, claimed to be the reincarnation of Buddha. He saved the people of Xia country and displayed supreme Tao. He killed many blood souls and was revered by the people of Xia country. These people were resplendent and were revered by the world. However, they were only a part of it. There were even some unknown people who appeared in the land of Xia. Although they were nameless, they bloomed with dazzling brilliance. Sooner or later, they would be known by the world. For the survival of the human race, this world had finally become different from before. This was the best of times, but also the worst of times. When humans were faced with a life and death situation, the path of human evolution was accelerated. No one knew where humans would go in the future. Capital, Yi family's ancestral home. During this half a year, the Yi father and son were in low spirits. Even the scorching afternoon sun could not illuminate their cold hearts. Due to the changes in the world, the Yi family was no longer the same as before. The family business had plummeted, and the ancient martial ability users had left to seek refuge with the major forces. The Yi family was no longer the Yi family of the past. Other than some money, the Yi family had nothing else to rely on. It was not just the Yi family. In this world of turmoil, the 8 great families in the capital had undergone a complete reshuffle. Several big shots in Xia had made a move and suppressed the 8 great families in half a month, completely centralizing the power of the military, politics, and business. The only thing that made the Yi father and son rejoice was that Mother Yi was still in the Yi family because of Yiling. It was also because she had preserved Yiling's body that the Yi family was able to survive this reshuffle. It had to be said that because of Yi Xian, the Yi family was still able to safely exist in the capital. This made the Yi father and son feel very fortunate. Hope rose in their hearts. If Yi Xian returned, perhaps the Yi family could rise again in this new world. However, in this torturous wait, Yi Xian still had not returned. The Yi father and son could not sleep at night. They had already gradually lost their last hope. Father, it's already been half a year. It looks like he won't be coming back. Yi Tsanghao leaned weakly on the chair. Looking at Yiling, in the crystal coffin, a trace of despair appeared in his eyes. Wait a little longer. Let's wait a little longer. Yi Tsanghai said in a low voice. Father, how can the dead come back to life? It's better to bury Ling. Yi Tsanghao smiled bitterly and shook his head. Hearing Yi Canghao's dispirited words, Yi Canghao's face flushed red. He shouted angrily, "Are you crazy?" Before Yi Xian left, he told us to protect Ling Er's body. If he comes back and finds out that we buried Ling Er, how can he let it go? Moreover, you have to know that the world has changed. Our Yi family is just a group of ordinary people. If it weren't for Yi Xian's deterrence, just our wealth alone would be enough to make these forces attack us. Yi Canghai said in a trembling voice. Looking at Yi Canghai's flushed face, Yi Canghai was extremely bitter. How could he not know the Yi family's current situation? If it weren't for the Wu and Si Qinglong helping the Yi family because of Yi Xian, their Yi family would have been completely devoured by these rising forces. Bang! Suddenly, the tightly shut door of the Yi family was kicked open. Dozens of ability users strode in. The leader was a man with a strong back and a bare waist. His face was ferocious and his body was covered in flames. He looked at the Yi family's father and son with greed in his eyes. Old Man Yi, our Roaring Flame Association suffered heavy casualties because of fighting against the exotic beasts. Now we need some funds from your Yi family. Are you going to give it or not? The man laughed sinisterly and strode towards the Yi family's father and son. Li Yuanlong, our Yi family treated you well in the past. Now you're betraying your master. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by others? Yi Canghai stood up angrily and roared. Ha! Li Yuanlong laughed sinisterly. He looked at Yi Canghai with ridicule in his eyes and said, "The world has changed. Your Yi family is no longer the Yi family of the past. If I were you, I would tactfully take the money and not talk nonsense." You! Yi Canghai was so angry that his body was unsteady. However, he also knew that his Yi family had no ability to resist these ability users. Old Man Yi, I once gave face to Lord Azure Dragon and didn't make things difficult for your Yi family. However, after such a long time, Lord Azure Dragon led his team to fight against exotic beasts. If you can't take out the money today, I'll see who can protect your Yi family. Li Yuanlong sneered. Bang! Yi Canghao slammed the table and stood up, roaring, "Li Yuanlong, don't be too complacent. Although my Yi family is not as good as before, let me tell you, my Yi family is not easy to bully. If Yi Xian returns, our Yi family will definitely rise again." Yi Xian. The existence that killed Li Huantian? At the mention of Yi Xian, Li Yuanlong's expression changed. A hint of fear flashed across his eyes, but it quickly disappeared without a trace. He sneered in disdain and said, "I can't afford to offend this Mr. Yi, but so what? I heard that this person disappeared from the world half a year ago. Perhaps he was already eaten by exotic beasts. He's just a dead man. Could it be that your Yi family is counting on a dead man to stir up trouble?" Ha! Li Yuanlong was obviously fearless and laughed wildly. He didn't put Yi Xian in his eyes at all. After all, he had endured for a long time and decided to take action today because he concluded that Yi Xian might have already died somewhere. He had deeply experienced the terror of these blood-soul exotic beasts. Chapter 110. Alright, we'll give you the money. How much do you want? Yi Canghai understood that people had to lower their heads under someone else's roof. He could only compromise with Li Yuanlong. "Dad!" Yi Canghai said unwillingly. "Shut up!" Yi Canghai gritted his teeth and reprimanded, but he was also extremely humiliated. Ha! Li Yuanlong laughed proudly. "Old Yi, you're a wise man. My Roaring Flame Society doesn't want much. Give me 90% of your Yi family's assets and I can promise you that I will never step into your house again." What? 90% of the assets? Even though Yi Canghai had guessed that Li Yuanlong was going to ask for an exorbitant price, he never imagined that the other party would be so greedy. 90% of the assets was practically giving the entire Yi family to Li Yuanlong. What was the difference between this and the Yi family's downfall? Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. Yi Canghai roared. Humph. Li Yuanlong's face turned cold. He said coldly, "Old thing, I see that you're refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Since that's the case, don't blame me for not caring about our old friendship." Li Yuanlong strode forward and arrived in front of the crystal coffin in the inner hall. When he saw Yi Ling's body in the coffin, the smile on his face became even more ferocious. "I heard that this person is Yi Xian's little sister. Her body has been here for half a year. Your Yi family spent tens of millions to build this crystal coffin just to preserve a dead person. In my opinion, this is simply too wasteful. Why don't you give this coffin to me and exchange it for a large amount of money? Wouldn't that be better?" Li Yuanlong kept touching the crystal coffin, his eyes filled with greed. "Don't touch her." Yi Canghai and Yi Canghai's faces changed. Yi Ling was their last hope in the crystal coffin. If even Yi Ling's body couldn't be preserved, then the Yi family would really cease to exist. Yi Canghai's face turned red. He didn't care if he was Li Yuanlong's opponent. He raised his fist and punched. Bang! Without waiting for Yi Canghai to come close, Li Yuanlong smiled sinisterly and kicked Yi Canghai to the ground. The sound of bones breaking was exceptionally ear-piercing. Pfft! Yi Canghai coughed up a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as paper as he glared at Li Yuanlong. His eyes were filled with unwillingness and rage. "You piece of trash. I used to call you young Master Yi, but now, in my eyes, you're worse than a dog." Li Yuanlong sneered. "Men, throw the woman in the coffin out for me. Send this coffin to the dazzling auction house and ask them how much it's worth." Li Yuanlong immediately ordered his subordinates to take action. "Yes, boss." A dozen arcanists shouted excitedly and strode toward the crystal coffin. "Li Yuanlong, she is Yi Xian's younger sister. If you dare to touch her, when Yi Xian returns in the future, you will definitely die without a burial ground," Yi Canghai roared furiously. "I don't dare." Li Yuanlong sneered and said, "Using Yi Xian, who we don't know if he's dead or alive, to scare me? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Attack!" Li Yuanlong did not waste any time and directly gave the order. A dozen arcanists once again stepped forward and began to pry open the crystal coffin. Woo, woo, woo. Suddenly, the originally sunny sky gradually darkened. A gust of cold wind blew through the Yi family's ancestral home. Cries of the dead could be heard from all directions, startling Li Yuanlong and the others. Their actions of prying open the coffin abruptly stopped. Rumble. Like a meteor falling to earth, like the Milky Way hanging upside down, a blood-colored flowing light traversed across the sky. Following an earth-shattering explosion, the Yi clan's ancestral residence suddenly shook, and a slender figure also appeared in the Yi clan's courtyard. Rumble. Blood-red lightning flashed across the sky. The dark clouds were extremely thick. Under the illumination of this terrifying celestial phenomenon, Yi Xian's body was shrouded in blood-red light. He had his hands behind his back as he looked indifferently at Li Yuanlong and the others. His face was calm and no one could tell what he was thinking. Yi Xian. Yi Canghai's expression was sluggish as he muttered to himself. Then, a look of ecstasy appeared on his face. In an instant, he seemed to have become dozens of years younger. Hiss. The sound of cold air being sucked in could be heard. Li Yuanlong's pupils dilated and his face instantly turned pale. A large amount of cold sweat rolled down his forehead and his feet unconsciously retreated. Yi. Mr. Yi. Li Yuanlong trembled as he spoke. His knees went soft as he knelt on the ground and continuously kowtowed towards Yi Xian. As for the dozen or so subordinates beside him, they collapsed to the ground like mud. There were even some with weak minds whose crotches were already drenched in urine. It was no wonder that these people were so afraid of Yi Xian. It was because Yi Xian was truly terrifying. He had done several major things in the capital, and each of them were ruthless and merciless. No one was left alive. How could Li Yuanlong and the others not feel fear when facing such a great demon? With the invasion of death, sweat poured down like rain. Li Yuanlong and the others were so frightened that they couldn't speak. They kowtowed like they were pounding garlic. They didn't even have the courage to fight to the death with Yi Xian. How do you want to die? Yi Xian slowly walked forward. His voice was very calm, so calm that Li Yuanlong and the others felt that death was slowly approaching them. Yi. Mr. Yi, spare us. Li Yuanlong trembled as he begged for mercy. He didn't dare to raise his head. Spare us? Yi Xian gently smiled and said, go repent in the underworld. Bang! Yi Xian's palm was like the sky, suppressing all things. Li Yuanlong and the others didn't even have the chance to resist. They instantly exploded into clouds of bloody residue. The bleak and beautiful rain of blood poured over the Yi residence's courtyard. At a glance, it was extremely terrifying. Cruel, bloody, and merciless. Yi Xian's terrifying methods made the father and son of the Yi family pale. However, there was a hint of joy in their eyes. They knew that Yi Xian's return would completely change the situation of the Yi family's gradual decline. Before the father and son of the Yi family could step forward, a terrifying scene made them stop in their tracks. They looked at Yi Xian in horror. Rumble. Yi Xian slightly narrowed his eyes. When his palm and fingers swept through the air, the souls of Li Yuanlong and the others condensed. The gate to the underworld slowly opened. As Yi Xian's palm sent the dozens of souls into the underworld, his cold and merciless voice rang out in the void. Send them to the Avicii hell and roast them in the underworld fire forever. They will never be reincarnated. As you command, Lord Yama. From the gate to the underworld came the dark crow's sinister voice. As the gate to the underworld closed, the Yi residents also quieted down. However, the father and son of the Yi family seemed to have lost their souls and were completely stunned. What was that? Yi Tsang murmured in horror. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't answer the father and son's questions. He slowly walked into the inner hall until he arrived in front of the crystal coffin. Only then did the father and son of the Yi family wake up and quickly walk towards Yi Xian. Xian, you're finally back. Yi Canghai's tears flowed down his face. He was choked with sobs and couldn't speak. Chapter 111. I don't like this form of address. You'd better not call me that. Yi Xian's eyes were deep and there was no emotion in his voice. Yi Xian, although I've let you and your son down, he's still your grandfather. What kind of attitude is this? Yi Canghao reprimanded with a complicated expression. A cold smile appeared on the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. He narrowed his eyes as he looked at Yi Canghao and said, Yi Canghao, I have to admit that you have the grace of giving birth to me, but you've never raised me. Previously, I didn't kill you, so it can be considered as repaying your kindness. However, if you still don't know how to advance or retreat, then don't blame me, Yi Xian, for being ruthless. Thud thud thud. Looking at Yi Xian's cold gaze, Yi Canghao's face turned pale and he subconsciously retreated. He fell silent at this moment. Okay, it's good that Yi Xian is back. We're all family. Don't ruin our relationship over such a small matter. Yi Canghai hurriedly tried to smooth things over. Xian, Suddenly, the sound of staggering footsteps could be heard from the inner hall. Yi Ping was helping Mrs. Yi out of the inner hall. When Mrs. Yi saw Yi Xian, tears of excitement flowed from her eyes. Mrs. Ye's appearance made Yi Xian ignore the father and son of the Yi family. He strode towards Mrs. Yi and said, Mother, I'm back. He's back. My son is finally back. In the past 6 months, Mrs. Yi had become more and more haggard in great grief. However, when she saw Yi Xian return, there was finally a glimmer of light in her eyes. I shouldn't have made things difficult for you. How can a dead person come back to life? Let's bury Ling, and return to Jiangnan, Mrs. Yi said while choking with sobs. Looking at his mother's haggard face, Yi Xian sighed. This was the only kinship he had and also the last bit of humanity he had. From now on, he would never let his family be in any danger. Bang! Yi Xian was silent. When he struck out with his palm, the crystal coffin that cost tens of millions instantly shattered. However, it did not harm Yiling's body. Under the surprised gazes of Mother Yi and the others, a jade bottle appeared in Yi Xian's hand. Pop! Yi Xian opened the jade bottle, and Yiling's soul floated out. Under Yi Xian's palm and fingers, a large amount of blood-colored runes merged into Yiling's soul, causing it to instantly merge into her physical body. Wang! A cool breeze surged, and the bloody light was misty. Under the stunned gazes of Mother Yi and the others, Yiling's physical body floated in the air. Her entire body bloomed with a blazing bloody light, blooming with an extremely shocking vitality. Squeak! After a full 10 minutes, the bloody light around Yiling dissipated, and she murmured. She opened her eyes in a daze, as if she had a big dream. Such a scene made the father and son of the Yi family dumbfounded. Even Mother Yi and Yi Ping were silent. They could not believe that a person who had been dead for half a year had really come back to life in front of them. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would have thought that it was a fantasy. Ling. Mother Yi was the first to recover from the shock. She staggered towards her daughter and hugged her tightly. A large amount of tears even wet her cheeks. Being hugged by Mother Yi, Yiling's eyes were filled with confusion as she muttered to herself, "Mother, I seem to have had a dream. I dreamed that I died and went to hell. Then, I saw Brother. He said that he would bring me back to the mortal world and let me come back to life. This dream is so real." Hearing Yiling's words, Mother Yi did not have any thoughts, but the expressions of the father and son of the Yi family changed drastically. They even instantly looked at Yi Xian with horror in their eyes. The father and son of the Yi family clearly remembered that after Li Yuanlong and the others died, more than 10 pale shadows appeared in the void and were directly thrown into a door by Yi Xian. There were even faint wails of the dead coming from the door, and some people even called Yi Xian Yama King. Could it be? Could it be that what Yiling said is true? Yi Xian really went to hell before, and that's how he brought her back to life. The father and son of the Yi family thought of this matter and felt terrible. If this was true, then how could Yi Xian be an ancient warrior? Then what kind of existence is he? When this question arose in the hearts of the father and son of the Yi family, the two of them suddenly felt their hair stand on end. They looked at Yi Xian with an expression of awe that they had never had before. Yi Xian could completely feel the panicked emotions of the father and son of the Yi family. This also made him immediately understand that the two of them probably already had a great guess about him. This also made Yi Xian look deeply at the father and son of the Yi family. Immediately, the two of them turned their heads away and became silent. A warning. Yi Xian's gaze was an undisguised warning. How could the father and son of the Yi family not understand? Naturally, they did not dare to make a ruckus. Brother. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, she called out to him. She also made Yi Xian walk slowly to his little sister's side. He comforted her, "Your body is still very weak right now. Rest well for a period of time. When the time comes, we will return to Jiangnan together." Yi Xian did not explain the truth of the trip to hell. After all, if he did, it would only add unnecessary trouble to him. If this kind of shocking matter were to spread to the outside world, it would definitely attract the attention of the entire world. This was also the result that Yi Xian did not want to see. Yi Xian, you can rest assured. The Yi family has large amounts of tonics. They will definitely help Ling recover in the shortest amount of time. Yi Canghai promised. Xian. Yi Xian. You just returned home today. Tonight, let's have dinner together as a family. Yi Canghai lowered his posture, faintly imploring. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was silent. Only after a dozen breaths did he calmly say, "There's no need for dinner. I still have some things to do. When I return, I will take them back to Jiangnan." After saying this, Yi Xian did not linger for a moment. He turned and walked out the door. This made the father and son of the Yi family extremely disappointed. Mother Yi anxiously said, "Xian, where are you going?" "Mom, don't worry about me. It's just that Ling Er's matter is not over yet. I will make the real culprit behind this die without a burial ground." Following Yi Xian's voice, he disappeared from the Yi family ancestral home. A waning moon hung in the sky. Under the moonlight, a skyscraper was illuminated without a speck of dust. On the rooftop of the skyscraper, a cool breeze blew, causing Yi Xian's gray hair to flutter in the wind. His hands were behind his back as he looked at the entire capital. His expression did not change at all. No one knew what he was thinking. Tap tap tap. A series of hurried footsteps sounded. Tai Li and a beautiful girl appeared on the rooftop. When the two saw Yi Xian's back, their eyes were filled with excitement. "Mr. Yi, is it really you?" The beautiful girl was about 16 years old. She gave people a feeling that she was extremely cute, but also stunning. Her beautiful face and curvaceous body made any man who saw her feel the urge to hold her in their arms and ruthlessly ravage her. Sexy loli. These 4 words should be enough to express the girl's appearance. Yi Xian indifferently turned around. When he saw the changes on Ling Long's body, a hint of amazement appeared in his eyes. He did not expect that after not seeing this little girl for half a year, she would already be so seductive. He was afraid that when she grew up, all the men in the world would kneel before her. Although Ling Long gave Yi Xian a sense of amazement, Yi Xian's heart did not waver in the slightest. When Ling Long and Tai Li saw Yi Xian's appearance, they were overjoyed and quickly walked towards him. Chapter 112. "Mr. Yi, you're finally back." The two of them came before Yi Xian. Their voices were filled with excitement as they bowed. "I called Azure Dragon, but I couldn't get through. Where is he?" Yi Xian asked softly. At the mention of Azure Dragon, Ling Long bit her lips and a worried look appeared on her face. She quickly described to Yi Xian what had happened to the world in the past 6 months. The blood soul exotic beasts were wreaking havoc all over the world, and the Xia was no exception. The entire Martial Security Department was mobilized to fight the blood soul exotic beasts all over the country. The communication facilities from before had long been abandoned. Even though the Martial Security Department was understaffed, Azure Dragon still left Tai Li and Ling Long in the capital to wait for Yi Xian's appearance. Yi Xian was not surprised at all as he listened to Ling Long's description of the world's changes. After all, these blood soul exotic beasts had escaped from the Blood Sea battlefield. He had already expected this situation. As Ling Long continued to describe, Yi Xian also learned about the supernatural forces that had appeared all over the world. However, these things did not affect him in the slightest. However, Yi Xian could clearly sense that when Ling Long mentioned some of the powerful people of the present era, her eyes were filled with great respect. She even seemed to have transformed into a lark, talking endlessly to Yi Xian. "Mr. Yi, you might not know this, but I saw sword god Yi Lingtian kill the East Sea giant beast with a single slash with my own eyes. There was also that absolute heaven sword god. With just one slash, he even..." Before Ling Long could continue, Yi Xian frowned slightly and waved his hand to interrupt her. "I'm not interested in knowing who these people are. I've summoned the two of you here today because there's something I need you to do." Ling Long held her breath when she saw Yi Xian frowning slightly. She quickly stopped talking. "Mr. Yi, you saved Ling Long's life, and I dare not forget the oath we made back then. No matter what orders you have, Ling Long will definitely not refuse, Ling Long said solemnly. Yi Xian nodded his head in satisfaction when he saw Ling Long's respectful attitude. He had saved this woman back then so that she could help him with some matters. Otherwise, Yi Xian would not be so kind as to save someone who had nothing to do with him. First, pass down my orders. Mobilize all the men of the Wu and department and find the real culprit behind the assassination of Yi Ling, at the airport in Jingdu half a year ago. The second matter is that I need a group of death warriors for my use. As for how to find these death warriors, I'll leave it to the two of you to decide. However, you must get it done in the shortest time possible, Yi Xian said firmly. Tai Li and Ling Long were stunned when Yi Xian instructed them to do these two things. A troubled expression flashed across their faces. Tai Li even had a bitter smile on his face as he said, Mr. Yi, you think too highly of the two of us. Although the second matter is difficult to handle, it's not impossible. But the first thing you ordered is to mobilize the entire Wu and department's strength. However, the members of Wu and department's 8 teams have all gone to various places to fight exotic beasts. With just a word from you, how can they? Tai Li wanted to say something, but he stopped and did not continue. Obviously, Yi Xian was only a guest of Earth team. He did not have that much authority to mobilize the entire Wu and department for his use. If it were the previous world, with Yi Xian's reputation, the 8 team leaders would give him some face. However, the entire world was in turmoil now. The 8 team leaders were already in a terrible fix. How could they have the time to help Yi Xian investigate the so-called real culprit behind the scenes? Yi Xian naturally understood this logic. However, since he could say such words, he naturally had a certain level of confidence. Tell the 8 team leaders that I want to see them at the Wu and department headquarters in 7 days. If any of them don't show up, then don't blame me, Yi Xian, for falling out with them. Yi Xian's voice was cold, causing Tai Li and Ling Long's faces to turn bitter. However, they could only agree because both of them knew that this Mr. Yi in front of them was a man of his word. The two of them only needed to pass on the message. As for whether the 8 team leaders came or not, it had nothing to do with the two of them. Yi Xian gave the two of them some more instructions. An hour later, Yi Xian drifted away. Looking at Yi Xian's disappearing figure, Tai Li sighed. Then, he looked at Ling Long and said with a hint of worry in his eyes, Ling Long, you didn't tell Mr. Yi that the nation protector sword god wants to take you as his disciple. Don't mention this again. You should know that I've already sworn to serve Mr. Yi for 10 years. How can I really take Yi Lingtian as my master? Ling Long said coldly. But are you really willing to do that? Tai Li's expression was complicated as he continued, you must know that Yi Lingtian was the second strongest expert in the world 100 years ago. His sword technique is divine. If you can obtain his inheritance, you'll definitely be an outstanding person in the future. Why don't you beg Mr. Yi and ask him to let you go? Alright, stop talking. Ling Long's expression turned cold. She turned around and walked away. Sigh. Tai Li sighed. He knew that this matter was too difficult. He quickly followed Ling Long and the two of them disappeared into the night. The warden, as the name suggested, was a place to imprison criminals. Since ancient times, anyone who had committed a serious crime would be sentenced by the Supreme Court and imprisoned in the warden's prison to serve their sentence. Some of the most heinous criminals would also be temporarily detained in the warden's prison before they were executed. Using heavy punishments in troubled times was a precedent in every dynasty, and the Xia kingdom was no exception. With the world in turmoil, there would naturally be people with ulterior motives stirring up trouble. However, in front of the colossus that was Xia, those with ulterior motives were directly suppressed. Those with light crimes were sentenced to death while those with heinous crimes were sentenced to death. This caused the warden to become overcrowded. Capital City. The warden. The black iron gate was tightly shut. An electric net of brambles and iron wires flickered with blue lightning from time to time. There were also heavily guarded soldiers patrolling the prison. At this moment, Yi Xian stood in front of the prison gate, attracting the attention of the patrolling soldiers. However, Yi Xian did not do anything out of the ordinary, so it was not appropriate for the soldiers to investigate. Buzz! Suddenly, the prison gate slowly opened. A middle-aged man in an official's uniform walked out quickly, followed by a large number of prison guards. These people walked nervously towards Yi Xian with flattering smiles on their faces. "Mr. Yi, we are honored by your presence. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you." Zhang Bin, the warden of the capital city. Although his official position was not high, and he was even less popular in the capital city, in this prison, he was the supreme existence. Originally, Zhang Bin was very leisurely. He was so leisurely that he played cards every day, drank a few sips of wine in the office, and patrolled the prison with his subordinates when he was free. As long as he ensured that the criminals did not escape, it could be said that his life was very peaceful. However, Zhang Bin's peaceful days had come to an end. Just last night, he was still sleeping in his warm bed when a call from the Ministry of War woke him up completely. He even told him that an extremely important person would be coming to the capital city's warden for an inspection today. No matter what the other party wanted, he had to cooperate fully. Chapter 113. The Big Boss of the Ministry of War. That was an existence that Zhang Bin looked up to. He never thought that the big boss of the Ministry of War would personally call him. How could someone who could be valued so highly by the big boss of the Ministry of War be an ordinary person? When Zhang Bin carefully asked who was coming to the prison for inspection, Yi Xian's name also entered Zhang Bin's ears. It made him shiver and his entire body tremble. Although Yi Xian had disappeared for half a year, his name had spread throughout capital city. How could Zhang Bin not know this person? Zhang Bin had arrived at the prison early in the morning to wait for Yi Xian's arrival. He was afraid that he would offend this Mr. Yi again due to his lack of etiquette. No need for formalities. "Has the person I want been arranged?" Yi Xian said calmly. "I've already arranged everything. Mr. Yi, please come in." Zhang Bin smiled obsequiously and led the way for Yi Xian. The group of people entered the prison in a grandiose manner. The four walls were densely covered with electric fences. There were also many soldiers with rifles patrolling the prison. That was the scene that Yi Xian saw. After passing through the prison gate, Zhang Bin led the way. From time to time, Yi Xian could see criminals walking around the prison. However, these criminals were all followed by prison guards, making them appear even more listless. Soon, Yi Xian saw a sports field in front of him under Zhang Bin's guidance. The sports field was as big as a football field. It was surrounded by electric fences and there were thousands of criminals trapped in it. They were all bald and wore prison uniforms. Their eyes were lifeless as if they had lost their souls. That was the state of thousands of criminals. "Open the gate." Following Zhang Bin's shout, the two jailers quickly opened the door. There were also a large number of soldiers armed with rifles guarding Yi Xian and the others. "Mr. Yi, please." Zhang Bin smiled obsequiously. Yi Xian slowly walked in, and Zhang Bin quickly followed. He even gestured to the jailer behind him to have the gun-wielding soldiers quickly follow the two of them. In the sports field. When Yi Xian arrived at a high platform, he looked down at the thousands of criminals below. These criminals, who were already numb and lifeless, finally noticed the existence of Yi Xian and the others. They all looked towards Yi Xian and the others. "Mr. Yi, there are a total of 1024 people here. Every one of them has committed a heinous crime and has been sentenced to death by the Supreme Court. They will be executed on the next day," Zhang Bin reminded in a low voice. "Hey, isn't this Warden Zhang? What brings you here today?" "Hee, Head Warden Zhang, you've brought a pretty boy. Are you going to give us a treat?" "This tender little thing makes Lao Tzu drool. I wonder if she can withstand Lao Tzu's torment in bed." Thousands of death row criminals laughed loudly. All kinds of obscenities were heard from time to time as if they were venting their inner frustrations. This made Zhang Bin's face turn gloomy. He even stole glances at Yi Xian from the corner of his eyes, afraid that Yi Xian would be dissatisfied. "Shut up, you bastards!" Zhang Bin scolded. "Hey, head warden Zhang is angry. Could it be that this pretty boy is your lover?" Ha! All sorts of laughter could be heard incessantly, causing Zhang Bin to be so angry that he was speechless. Although Zhang Bin was the warden, he had no way to control these prisoners who were about to be executed. After all, they were about to die. Why would they be afraid of a mere warden? "Mr. Yi, I'm really sorry." Zhang Bin's face was red as he bowed and apologized to Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes were indifferent. His gaze swept across the faces of these death row criminals, then he said to Zhang Bin, "You can take your men out now." "Yes." "Ah. Mr. Yi, what did you say?" Zhang Bin's expression changed drastically. He looked at Yi Xian with horror in his eyes. "I said, you can take your men out now." Yi Xian frowned slightly and repeated himself. "Mr. Yi, you can't do that." Zhang Bin's face was pale while large amounts of cold sweat appeared on his forehead, and he said anxiously, "You don't know, but these people are about to be executed. If you're left here alone, then they'll definitely kill you." It was no wonder that Zhang Bin was so afraid. Although Mr. Yi was a martial artist, the death row criminals on the field were all vicious people. There were thousands of them. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. Zhang Bin was very sure that if Yi Xian was left here alone, he would end up in an extremely miserable state. If something happened to Yi Xian, how would he explain it to his superiors? That was what Zhang Bin was most worried about. "Did you not understand what I said?" Yi Xian said coldly. But. Zhang Bin stuttered and refused to leave with his men. "Go. I'll take care of everything," Yi Xian said coldly. "Yes, sir." Zhang Bin looked hesitant, but in the end, he gritted his teeth and left the field with the soldiers behind him. However, before he left, he kept warning the death row criminals that if they dared to be rude to Yi Xian, they would suffer a fate worse than death. Unfortunately, how could these death row inmates put Zhang Bin's warning in their eyes? At this moment, their eyes were shining as they looked at Yi Xian, who was on the high platform. There were even some who faintly walked towards Yi Xian. As Zhang Bin left with his men, Yi Xian stood on the high platform and looked down at the thousands of death row criminals. His expression was calm and there was no fear. "Brothers, I, Li Laosan, want this gigolo. If anyone dares to steal him from me, don't blame me for fucking killing you." A middle-aged man with a ferocious face looked at Yi Xian with a lustful gaze. He was striding towards Yi Xian. "Ha, Li Laosan, go easy on him. Don't break this gigolo." Someone laughed out loud. "This kid is really looking for death. Doesn't he know where he is? How dare he face us alone?" Someone laughed cruelly. The atmosphere in the field was lively. Most people looked at Yi Xian as if they were looking at a dead man. "Humph, you idiots. Have you all been locked up until you became stupid?" It was a thin and weak-looking young man who wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He gave off a refined feeling, but when he said those words, the prisoners were startled. They looked at him with eyes filled with fear. "Brother Jean, what do you mean?" Someone asked. "This person dares to face us alone. He's either an idiot, or he doesn't take us seriously at all. I'm more inclined to the second possibility. I'm afraid this Li Laosan will end up very badly," the skinny young man said with certainty. He looked at Yi Xian with even more surprise. On the high platform, Li Laosan was less than 3 meters away from Yi Xian. At that moment, his face was filled with a ferocious smile. He looked at Yi Xian from head to toe and said a lot of obscene words. "Tisk, tsk, tsk." This body, this skin. Lao Tzu can meet such a fine specimen like you before he dies. The heavens have eyes. Today, Lao Tzu will. Chapter 114. Qi. Suddenly, without waiting for old Li San to finish his words, Yi Xian did not move. His sword fingers streaked across the air, and an extremely terrifying bloody light shot out from his sword fingers. Old Li San's smile had not faded away, but his entire body was cut in half at the waist, turning into two horrifying halves of a corpse that fell limply onto the high platform. Glaring blood spurted out, and a corpse that was too horrible to look at. This was the scene that appeared before the eyes of the thousands of death row prisoners, and it also caused the entire field to become eerily silent. Ah! After a full 10 breaths, an unknown person let out a scream, completely breaking the dead silence on the field. It also caused the death row prisoners to cry out in alarm. Finally, a trace of fear appeared in their eyes as they looked at Yi Xian. Tap, tap, tap. The wind was light and the clouds were light, untainted by a speck of dust. Yi Xian strolled on the high platform. With every step he took, it was as if he was stepping on the apex of the hearts of these prisoners, making it difficult for them to breathe. In my eyes, Yi Xian, all of you are a bunch of trash, scum, and maggots in a cesspool. Yi Xian's voice was cold and emotionless. His eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at these prisoners. As Yi Xian's voice fell, the expressions of the thousands of death row prisoners changed. Some of them even took out sharp weapons sharpened from toothbrushes from their arms, and their gazes towards Yi Xian became extremely fierce. Although Yi Xian had displayed a bloody scene, these people were not frightened. After all, they were all people who were about to die, and had long been prepared to die. They were not so afraid that they did not dare to attack Yi Xian. Sir, don't think that just because you're an ancient martial artist that you can make us afraid just because you killed old Li San. Why don't you tell us why you're here? The young man with the gold-rimmed glasses strolled out, looking at Yi Xian with a puzzled expression. Yi Xian could completely see that this young man was an extremely shrewd person. This made him nod with slight satisfaction, and he said, "You're very good. You're not as stupid as them." As Yi Xian said this, he looked at the death row prisoners in a scrutinizing manner. His voice was strange and sinister as he said, "I'm here today to play a game with you. The rules of this game are very simple. There is no time limit. With this field as the boundary, the thousands of you will kill each other. No matter what method you use, as long as you kill your companions around you, the first 100 people who survive will become the final victors." As Yi Xian said this, his voice paused slightly, and his expression became increasingly strange. He said, "Of course, this game naturally has the rewards you want. The 100 people who survive will not be executed, and will also leave this prison with me. From then on, you will become Yi Xian's lackeys." As Yi Xian's words fell, the thousands of death row prisoners became deathly silent. Only the sound of heavy breathing could be heard from the crowd, and an extremely oppressive atmosphere grew in the crowd. How important was life? If not for the desperate situation, no one would want to die. These death row prisoners were no exception. "Why should we believe you? Everyone, don't believe him. He's making us kill each other." After the silence, someone loudly refuted Yi Xian. "You are all people who will die. You have no choice. Whether you believe or not, it's all up to you. Now, the game begins." Like a demon's temptation, like a devil's guidance, Yi Xian's smile was strange and sinister, and it caused the entire field to once again sink into an oppressive atmosphere. Some people quickly kept a distance from the people around them, and their faces were full of vigilance. "Second brother, you and I are sworn brothers. Why are you so far away from me? Do you really believe this person's nonsense?" In a remote corner, a large man with dark skin was bitterly and hatefully rebuking a young man. His face was filled with extreme sadness. Big brother. Looking at the large man's sorrowful appearance, the young man bit his lips, and guilt appeared in his eyes. Yes, this was his big brother who had been sworn brothers for 10 years. What was wrong with him? Could it be that he did not even trust his sworn brother? Looking at the young man's guilty face, the large man laughed boldly and strode towards the young man. He said, "Second brother, do you still remember that when you and I became sworn brothers, we swore together that even if we were not born on the same year, month, and day, we would die on the same year, month, and day? Even if we were sentenced to death, we would still be good men after 18 years. Big brother has never regretted knowing you. Big brother, I was wrong. I should not have doubted you." Hearing the large man's bold words, the young man's mind was shaken, and he directly choked with sobs. He strode forward and knelt in front of the large man, and tears of guilt fell from his eyes. "Second brother." The large man's face was still bold, as if he had already given up his life. He stretched out his hand and pressed on the young man's shoulder, as if he wanted to help him up. However, at this moment, a cruel and cold smile appeared on the large man's face. Crack! It was vicious and as fast as the wind. Before the young man could react, the large man's broad palms were like 2 iron pliers, and they directly grabbed the young man's neck. Under the effect of a huge force, the young man's neck was irregularly twisted, and a large amount of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Ugh! Ugh! The young man's eyes were filled with fear, and he stared at his sworn brother in front of him. His body was constantly twitching, and he was desperately struggling. However, the large man's face was ferocious, and his hands were holding the young man's neck, and his eyes were filled with madness and excitement. Die, die. The large man laughed madly, and his eyes were filled with madness. He said, "Second brother, I'm sorry. I don't want to do this either, but only by killing you first will I have a glimmer of hope to survive. Don't you think so?" The young man struggled in pain. He wanted to roar, and he wanted to roar even more. However, as the large man's strength increased, the young man could clearly feel that his throat was breaking, and his tongue was already sticking out. He was already in a situation where he was going to die. If the young man had known that this would be the result, he would have made the first move to gain the upper hand. However, there was no medicine for regret in this world. In the end, he could only have his neck broken by his so-called sworn brother and die. Unwilling, angry, resentful, and regretful. With these complex emotions, the young man's body stiffened, and he finally stopped breathing. However, his eyes were wide open before he died, proving that he died with regrets. Bang! The large man threw the young man's body on the ground like he was throwing away garbage, and his face was even more cruel and fierce. He looked around at the prisoners present, and then quickly took out 2 chopsticks from his chest. The sharp wooden tip seemed to be emitting a bloodthirsty light, and he was cautious and ruthless against the other prisoners. Such a scene naturally fell into the eyes of thousands of prisoners, and it was also because of this scene that the prisoners present were in a complete mess. The trust between people was gone, and everyone quickly kept a distance from the people around them. Even if they were brothers, they did not trust each other. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.